Hey, what's up, everybody? So we're here to talk. This video is probably going to be like 5 hours long. I don't know. It's another one of these JRPGs that came out recently. I thought it came out this year because that's when I found it on FitGirl, but I guess they just released a DLC, which I was not a huge fan of the DLC. So much so that I will not be covering it in this video. I will like briefly cover it, but the main game I liked a lot. Like I liked it so much, it's like in competition to be like my favorite game that I played this year. Between that and Clair Obscur at this juncture, I can't think of anything else that really comes super close. I really liked AI Limit as well, but just like playing through like a kind of like a traditional JRPG style game was excellent. And this one's done with like the pixel art and everything, and it's really like homage, which is like I feel like kind of holds it back a little bit, but it kind of like has throwbacks to like Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IX, like Final Fantasy 10. Wait, 10? No, 12. Final Fantasy 12. It's got some for like Chrono Cross and like Xenogears and like kind of that. It's a lot of like the PlayStation era, right? With some kind of like direct pulls from other things, and like I'm fine with all that, right? You're kind of selling this game because this is one of those like Kickstarter games, it seems, because at the end credits when I beat the game there was like half an hour of like thank yous to all like the backers, which was kind of annoying. I couldn't skip, but whatever. I really don't have that many complaints about this game besides the fact that like the story was excellent. I might have some qualms as I go through it and start nitpicking it, looking through my notes again and stuff, but having had beat this game like today, right, and starting up on the DLC, and the DLC we'll get to that afterwards. I would say this game is excellent. I super enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. Before, like, if all you want to do is just know my take, I'm going to try to start doing this a little bit more instead of like giving my take at like the end of like a 6-hour video. Like, Jesus. So we're gonna by what is it called? Or my bluff, like in the military. My bluff is that like Chained Echoes is excellent. I would give it an A to an A+. If you like JRPGs from like the PlayStation era, like the late Super Nintendo to like the PlayStation era, then like you will like this game. It is fun. The story's great. The characters are all very good. There's too many of them as far as I'm concerned, but I mean, there's too many in Final Fantasy VI, and that didn't stop that from being like one of the best games ever made, right? And the problem with that is just like, you don't get enough time. Like you have like the two main characters, Glenn and Leanne, and then you have other characters that are like kind of main characters for certain portions of the story or like their individual plot lines. They'll become like very important and then they'll like disappear. And if you don't have them in like your active battle party, I literally forgot about some of these characters because it was like days later before they popped up again in the story, and I was not using them in like my main combat thing. That being said, some of the writing is not the greatest. Like there were a couple times I got confused, but it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Again, like the overarching story, the lore of the world, like the way it's set up. Oh, it pulls from like Final Fantasy Tactics with some stuff. Like it's just excellent. Like highly recommended. Like you can go away now and not watch the rest of this and just be like, hey, is Chained Echoes good? If you just randomly stumbled upon this video when you were like, Chained Echoes, I want to know more about it, I would say just go play it. If I have no qualms about recommending this to anyone, like just the main game. And I'll get to why the DLC later, but if you want to, if at this point, like, I mean, the version I got just has like the DLC built in, but it's like a completely separate thing. Like it's not built into the game. It's like you like play it like after you beat the game essentially. And I think you can play it like whenever, but because it's just like an option on the main menu, but I don't know why you would. Like, you really want to be playing it like right at the end, if not after you've beaten the game. And I just don't, by that point, I'm just like, what? I don't understand why this is like this. And it's fine. Like, again, it's like, if you want to play it and you enjoy it, I got no issue with that. I don't think it's bad. It's just like, for me, I just don't like the way it's done. And again, I'll get to that later. So let's just talk about the game generally. If you want to hear more about the game and think about it some more. So the leveling, there's no leveling system. There is there is like a SP mechanic, which is like you get skills. So if you've ever played Chrono Cross, it has a star system. If you haven't played Chrono Cross, what that means is that you get these shards of grimoire after fighting certain bosses or getting past certain story points in the game. And for every grimoire shard you get like a star, and all your characters get the star. And what that means is they get access to unlock like one skill. And so your skills are split up into 3 parts. There's like the active combat skills, there's passive combat skills, and there's just like ability modifiers. So this game also has difficulty settings. As I'm mostly here for the story, I played on the easiest difficulty setting. The easiest difficulty setting, you're never gonna die. Like you don't really have to spend that much time thinking about it or whatnot. I have read that if you really want to, the combat can get like very tricky and it becomes very puzzly, kind of like those old Zyboid games. I can't remember what any of them are called, like the Cthulhu one and the space one that was kind of like Phantasy Star, where it's like, and then the Penny Arcade ones, where it's like the battles again are not about leveling up, because you level up at certain points in the game, and they're not really. I mean, you can grind for SP, which levels up some of your skills, but your skills only level up like twice, and like I didn't grind at all in this game, and some of my characters had like all their skills and like 100% like maxed out levels, right? So again, I'm playing on easy mode, but there's really like the game. There's really no reason to grind unless you want like slight power level increases. And when I say slight, it's like, okay, so if I have a skill that does like, it attacks like all my enemies and it does like 0.8% of like my base level attack, right? That's like a skill that some people have. And then I level it up to next level instead of costing like 20 tech points, because everyone just has tech points. There's no mana points, so there's only one bar, which I appreciate. I hate when there's like 2 bars. It's like gets way too muddy for me. So whatever, it costs like 20 tech points to use, and then you level it up with like 200 or whatever SP, and then now it costs like 15, right? So it's like it's incremental, and so it's really not that big of a deal. As long as the biggest thing about this game is utilizing elemental weaknesses and strengths and buffs and debuffs. That's like the main thing about this game, which is like excellent. I love that. Because you can like buffs and debuffs pretty much work like on everybody, like every boss. Like I never used like a buff or a debuff on somebody and it just like did not work that I can think of. But then you can only use buffs. You can only use debuffs like. A lot of them you can only use like one time per battle. So then again, it becomes like this puzzling aspect of like, when do you want to use it? When do you want to like do you want to cast like inact, which makes them like skip a turn when like you need to heal, right? So you enact them and then you have a second to like breathe and like heal your guys up or something, right? And then there's like poison and bleed, which are both dots, and you can get them both on there and you can keep them both up, right? So there's a lot of kind of like mechanisms when it comes to like how the combat works. There's mech battles and there's regular battles, and they work like slightly differently. The biggest thing is you have this bar called the overpower bar, and like if it gets too high, you like overpower too much, and then you become weaker than if you never like overpowered at all. And you can make that bigger or smaller again in like the settings, depending on how much of like a master of like the combat you want to be. And then the same thing with the when you're a mech, it has like, there's no overpower. There's just like you're good, and then you're overloaded, I think is what it's actually called. And so there's like 3 different gear functions for each of the mechs, which like one function will like push the bar one way, one will push the other way, one will just keep it neutral, one lets you charge up your technique points, one is more powerful but uses more technique points, and one is like regular powerful and like regular TP points, right? So then it's like there's a lot of balancing and thinking and processing, which is fun if you're into that. I am not, so thank God there's like an easy mode, because I never had to cheat on this. Like I never once turned on like a cheat or anything, because like it was unnecessary. I just put it on easy, like story mode, and I just played through the fucking game, and I still enjoyed it, you know. So that's kind of how combat works. So you can equip, right? So you have all these lists of skills, and there's like a total of, I'm trying to remember, there's like 5, 10, there's like 15 to 20, I think there's 20 skills for each character. I mean, you can only equip like 8 to 10. I don't remember exactly. And so there's a balance with that. But what I found generally was like you want buffs, debuffs, and you want anything that does elemental damage, and you just want to have like a nice spattering. So the main character, like the main hero Glenn, he gets like elemental attacks, and then he has like an attack. He has like an attack debuff and like a defense debuff. And so you equip the 4 of those elements, right? Because it's like earth, fire, wind. Earth, fire, wind, water, air, and then there's shadow, light, right? But he doesn't get any shadow light. So you just equip those 4, and then you equip the attack debuff, and then you just have like a couple other things you can throw on there, and I never used any of that stuff. Like I pretty much, once you unlocked the elemental stuff, that's all I used. And so then Leanne, who's like the main heroine, she starts off with like elemental attacks, but only 3 of them. Wind, fire, and water. And so I just used her like most of the game until I got like a character who had like shadow and light magic, and then I got a fairy, and then I got my girlfriend, the the 14-year-old princess, who's my favorite character, and she's got a dog named Cress, and I love her with all my heart, and I would protect her and kill any of you to save her life. She's the best fucking character in this game, hands down. I love her to death. So like, she is so excellent. And we'll get all that when we get to the story. But okay, so each character has their own weapon, right? So it's like Glenn has a sword because he's like the knight, a sword and shield. Leanne is the dragoon, so she's got a spear. Amelia's like a healer, but she's got a gun. I don't know. It was cool. And then it gets more fun. There's like a guy who sings, and he uses a rapier, but mostly he just sings. And then there's I'll hit all these characters up. There's like bow guy. There's guy who has no arms and uses magic weapons. There's like thief lady who uses a katana, which is badass. And then later, like get to near the end of the game, there's some optional characters, like a monk, like a traditional punch-in monk that can do like combo attacks. And then there's like the blue mage is like a goat, which is hilarious because it just eats monsters and like goats eat anything. So I high five again, like just quality all around. And then like a hidden character. I mean, the goat, the monk, and then there's like a knight. They're all hidden characters. I think those are only 3 hidden characters that you can just not get. There's also like a eagle knight, like an eagle man knight who's pretty funny. So that's cool. I think I covered most of them. We'll get to all these characters more in depth when we get into their actual appearance and whatnot. Okay, sorry. So the mechanics of the game, yeah, okay. And so then there's items. I virtually never use them because again I'm playing on story mode. And after a battle, you recover all your MP, all your tactical points, and all your hit points. So there's no reason to use like items outside of battle. And then the game has like an extensive like crafting system, which I used, but it took a lot of my time, and I ended up not needing. It was unnecessary, right? And then there's like ultimate weapons you can craft later. And when I say craft, you can like infuse your weapons with like extra power through finding items in the world or like buying items. And then there's like crystals, and you can like power up the crystals by combining crystals or finding more crystals in the world, and then you can put those in your weapons. So there's a lot of customization and a lot of like, you can put a lot of thought into this. And I imagine if you're playing on like a harder difficulties, you really got to like plan ahead. Like maybe you go to the battle and you're like nope out, and then you know it's like, okay, that guy's weak to this, and I need to put these buffs, and then he does this kind of attack. So then you can go back to like the forge, and you can just like be fucking around for like an hour trying to get your like optimal build, and then you can go back in. I bet that's very satisfying for people who care about that shit, which I do not. So, but again, it's there, and I didn't have to use it, so like I'm all about it, right? And if you like it, like, hey, it's there, fucking do it. Fantastic, high fives all around. Again, everything about this game, like playing this game, excellent. Now the Sky Armor, it's a little less crafty and stuff. You just find stuff, and then you can like, so you have 4 characters who can use they call it Sky Armor, the mechs. Glenn, Sienna, who is the thief katana lady. Beth Raz, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but he's like the lizard man with no arms, which is fucking awesome. And then Victor, who's like the elf bard, essentially. And that's it, right? And so with them, you can like change out like pretty much everything about the mech. You can change like the main weapon, the sub weapon. You can change the look. You can change the color. You can change the model of mechs depending on like the mechs you find out in the world and stuff. And some are better, more specialized to certain things. And then you can level them up. You level up the items. Like when you gain SP from battles, it just automatically goes into these various like the weapons, pretty much. And then when you max out, as you level up the weapons, they give you stat bonuses for your mechs too. And then when you trade weapons out, you keep the stat bonuses even if you don't get the abilities, right? So you kind of want to do a lot of switching around with the weapons to make sure that you like maximize the capabilities of your mechs. And so that's a cool part too. And then what else? Okay, then the game highly encourages like exploration generally by giving it does this very genius idea of this like reward board system where each like not kind of like the main, I want to say 6 or 7 biomes that you enter in the game all have like these boards that like as you kill certain monsters a certain way, or you complete subquests, or you find all the treasures, or you find the secret treasures or the buried treasures or all this stuff, it like fills out this board. And then as the board, and then when stuff starts connecting, you get like a higher, so you get rewards for every spot on the board you fill out. And then when the board connects enough points, you get like more rewards. So it's like a way to like really encourage. And there were times when I caught myself like just like, okay, I'm just gonna find like this treasure, and I'd spend like 10-15 minutes trying to find like the last treasure to like complete the board to get more stuff. And I'm like, I don't know why the fuck I'm doing this. It's like unnecessary. Right? But it pulled me in unintentionally. Well, not it intentionally did it, but I got pulled in when I was like, no, I just want to fucking get through this game and like play the story and whatnot. So again, excellent system, excellent idea. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know if the guy came up with this by himself or if like he cribbed it off somebody else, but I don't think I've ever seen anything that like rewarded you for just, I mean, sometimes you have games where it's like you fill out the whole map and you get like a present, right? And stuff like that. Like I know Star Ocean kind of does that, but I can't think of anything else where it's like there's like a board that like I have like subquests on this board that I should have access to. There's a bunch of different side quests. The side quests you need to like, for example, like unlock the some of the hidden characters, some hidden items. Like you can get like the best mech in the game, the 2 best mechs, but you got to do like sub quests for that. The world is very diverse. I guess I should talk about that. So the world is very diverse. I would not say it's woke at all. Like there's one of the main characters, or like one of the party members is a woman, and she's married to a woman, but it's not in your face, right? It's not like thrown in your face or anything like that. There's like a queen who's like a fat black woman, but again, it's not thrown in your face. It just like exists, you know. And for being like a stereotypical like fantasy setting, it may seem a little off, especially playing Final Fantasy games, which are all like very Eurocentric, very like Japanese kind of like pale-skinned stuff going on. And you play this game, and there's like in your party, there's like 2 black people, which again is like, I'm not saying that's woke. That's my point, right? But it may come off like, if it's one of those things where if you see pictures of it, or I'm sure like assholes online who like haven't played the game might come across and be like, oh, woke, it's got black people in it, stuff like that, right? Because that happens, right? I don't think it's as bad as like actual woke people say it is. Like, oh, I can't even play a game with a black person in it and enjoy myself without somebody calling it woke. And it's like, there are people who do that. That is true. But those people also exaggerate. So it goes both ways. But, so, because there were several times I was just playing and I was like, I could see why someone would be like, oh, this is a woke game. I can see it because of like this and this. And I'm like, nah. Because like, to me, like the whole woke thing, the DI thing is like, it's shoving agenda into your face. That's the problem with it, right? And so this is just like, it exists. This person made up this fucking world, everything about it. So if this could be like, this could look exactly like the castles in France in like medieval Europe. And if they got like Asians and black people and all this stuff here, then like so be it, because this person made up this fucking world. You know what I mean? Like I'm fine with that. Like there's no historical revisionism. There's no like trying to take a different property and like shove a bunch of weird bullshit into it. Like these are all original characters and all this stuff, right? And so I had no problem with any of it. It's fine. Didn't bother me. I didn't think about it like barely at all. Besides the fact, like a couple times I was like, is this going to do that weird thing where it's trying to preach to me about like some bullshit? And it didn't. And I was like, mad respect. This guy did a great job. And this, to me, it's like, honestly, hey, if your mindset is like, oh, I want my games to be more diverse and all this bullshit, this is how you do it. You just have a great game with good story and great characters that I give a fuck about, and you just kind of like slip that stuff in, right? Because then I'm like, oh yeah, I played a game with this gay couple. They were awesome. I love that. Like, not like, hey, gay, be gay. You're gay. Everyone should be gay. And then you're like, you know what I fucking hate? Gay people in games. Because it's thrown in my face, and it's like, okay, man, this is like getting in the way of the story. Like none of that happened. Like this was great. The gay couple is fantastic. It all makes sense. It's like no problems with that whatsoever. And the rest of the stuff was just kind of there, right? It just existed because this person created a world, and that's how it is. And I'm 100% fine with that. In fact, it's great. High five to them. So where was I going with this? Okay, so I think I covered the majority of like the gameplay stuff. So again, it's like highly recommend this game. It's excellent. I'm going to spend the next like however many fucking hours, probably at least 2, talking about the plot all the way from the beginning to the very end, as I usually do in these videos. So if you don't give a fuck about that, or you don't like the long-winded stuff, again, if you're just here to be like, how's the game? How's it play? Should I play it? Yes, you should play it. It plays very well. It's excellent. I guarantee you'll have a good time. And so do that. All right. And so if you want to stick around for the long rant about the story, then buckle on up, folks. Here we go. So the game opens up with like a traditional Chrono Trigger beginning. If you don't know what that is, Chrono Trigger opens up with the character being woken up by his mom in his room. And this game begins with the main character of this game named Glenn. He wakes up in his room, and his mom wakes him up in the morning. And then we find out this is a dream. None of this fucking stuff happened. He actually wakes up in like the cargo hold of some sort of airship or whatever. And then we learn the name is Glenn. Some lizard-looking dude named Hein complains about us sleeping in and tells us that the captain wants to see us, and then he leaves. We are apparently on some sort of like suicide mission to break through some sort of like vanguard over like some city called Weingard. Yeah. So we wander around. We do kind of like, there's some like mini little side quests where you get some choices that can have an effect on us getting like some little items. There's some soldier who wants to run away from the battle because he doesn't want to die, and we're like, do it. And You can choose to tell him to man up and stick around, but if you tell him to run away, you can get like an item from him later. And then we find out that this, sorry, not Wineguard, Wineshire, is that the Wineshire got attacked by the Kingdom of Turn, and so we were hired as like we're the Iron Bull like mercenary gang, and so we were hired to head over to Wineshire and like liberate them. And the reason why it's like a suicide mission is because they have all these like cannons and anti-air stuff and whatnot, and so we're gonna like roll on in there to liberate them and whatnot, and like people are all gonna probably die or something, because we got that our goal is to head in there and take care of that business. So we learned that Glenn is like one of the top like sky armor pilots in like the whole world, and the sky armor again is like the mech suits. They're like fun looking knights things. And he's also like very good when it comes to like mechanical stuff, and also that he just has like a bunch of kind of like random skills and things that he's like knowledgeable about and good about. And this gets like built upon the more we play into the game. We then find the captain, who's this Marlock guy. He's some big bull dude, and he's getting all his juices up for the Iron Bull band to like get in there and take care of business. And then we also meet Killian, who is another member of like the gang, or I guess the mercenary company is what it should be more like. And he is another sky pilot, and him and Glenn are apparently like best friends forever or whatever. Him and Glenn and Killian talk about like his family and how he left his family because he loves the call of battle, and that this is how they're going to change the world or something or whatever. And then Glenn talks about how he joined the mercenary band partially because he always dreamed of being like a sky armor pilot, and that plays this whole concept of him wanting to like fly is like a key component in like his character and like his like existence or whatnot. So we get on the sky armor, Killian and I, and we head out, or Glenn and Killian, and then they fight some other sky armors. We get like a little tutorial about how all that works, and it's pretty straightforward at this juncture. We get like a more detailed tutorial later on when we open it up for the actual game. And then we get blasted from the sky. So now it's time to fight on foot. And so we get a little like this is how you fight on ground tutorial. And so we fight our way into the castle, and then we run into the guy we told to flee, gives us some stuff. We see that the ship that we were just on, that we took off in the sky armor, is crashing down into the water. And a bit later, we dodge out of the way of some sky armor that looks like Anubis, which is cool, and we can get that later, don't worry. Then there's like a ton of bad guys rush us, and Marlock and Hein jump down to aid us. Now we get a team of 4. And then we get this is when the overdrive system kind of kicks in, and we get a tutorial about how that works, which is I've already explained. So we kick their asses, and then the Anubis sky armor guy rushes us. Some mercs get it, so like some mercenaries get in the way of him so that we can rush this stone. And this stone is somehow is related to how we're gonna like free Wineshire from the turn. We just got to get the stone, and once we get that, then I guess freedom. It's like step 1, get the stone. Step 2, ? Step 3, Wineshire's free. That's kind of how this thing got played out. While we're headed that way, Killian stops because he notices like a strange white-haired man that's just like standing up on like some ramparts looking down. And then we get to the stone, and this guy, let's see. Oh, then the Anubis sky armor like flies down again, and Killian recognizes him as a famous like Dopa soldier, Dopen Saldner or whatever. Don't worry, it never comes up again. So then we fight him in this boss fight, and during the fight, there was a guy on the ship. We were talking about like should he invest in a lot of dynamite or not, and if we say yes, he shows up and uses dynamite, which is cool. Doesn't really matter. This is all just like it's kind of like. A lot of this, like the opening of the game, is like homages to like I mentioned, like Final Fantasy games and whatnot, and then they just like don't go. Nothing really matters or goes anywhere here. Like nothing's that important. So if you choose not to help the dynamite guy, like the battle's not like that much harder, to be completely honest, or whatever. And so then we defeat this guy, or I have written down like YYN. I don't know if I can't remember if that's the name of the actual like guy who's piloting the thing or whatever. Maybe it is. Anyway, and he's like, "No, who told you about the stone?" And then Morlock's like, dude, fuck this guy. Just destroy the stone. That was the job. So make it happen. And we're like, okie dokie. But then everyone's like, no, stop us. Stop. You can't do that. Like, it's not what you think's going to happen. And we're like, whatever, Cholo, like, get the fuck out of here. So we smash the stone, of course. And then Win-Win calls us fools and says something about a grimoire, right? So it's all like apocalyptic stuff. And then a light comes out of the stone, and the whole place like explodes in this giant like Lavos style explosion with like the big circle, and it's all light and like lasers are shooting out of it and stuff, and it covers like the whole area. So again, another homage to like Chrono Trigger. Excellent. Let's see, the huge blast of energy. Oh, it destroys the whole area. Then we see a large mech, this mech that we saw before. So there's the Anubis mech and there was this other mech, and then we get like the title card. And then we get, it's history time. So this is what I was talking about when I mentioned that it kind of cribs off Final Fantasy Tactics a little bit. So every now and then throughout the game, it'll have like, if you played Final Fantasy Tactics, you'll know that every once in a while, it'll just kind of like take a step back from the game or the story or like any of the stuff, and it'll just show you like a map of like, I can't remember the name of the world. Isengard. No, it's I don't remember. Anyway, the Final Fantasy Tactics world. And it'll give you like some history. It'll be like, oh, these people did this thing, and then later on this guy betrayed him and this guy did this. So this cribs on that a little bit, where it pulls out and then we get some history of the world, and it says Valandis, which is this continent, has a 3,000 year history. It used to be super nice, and there was like a magic city in the center of it called Nysa, which collected like sages from all over the world, and it taught magic, and it was super great. And then there were 6 kingdoms, the north being the kingdom of Tarn, and which had everlasting rain. The south, which is Escania, it's a harbor of Farnsport, and then to the east, Gravos, which is like the east, Gravos. Yeah, to the east, Gravos. And then in the year like 806 of the 7th era, Tarn captured Gravos, and then a giant explosion occurred, and tens of thousands died. And that's literally what just happened right now. Right? So we're in the 7th age, it's the year 806, and Gravos, Wineshire was in this Gravos region, and we caused the giant explosion, or Glenn caused it. And because of this giant explosion destroying all these troops on like both sides and the whole mess of the whole thing, this created a peace treaty between the 3 kingdoms, where they were all like, what the fuck was that? We need to take a break and figure this out. And this ended 157 years of war, right? And then like a year later, so there's like a year of peace, a party was thrown in Farnsport. And at this point we pick up with Leanne and Rob. So Rob is Leanne's like childhood friend. Leanne is secretly the well, we'll get there. Oh no, we learned about it right away. Never mind. She's secretly like she's the princess of Tarn, the Northern Kingdom. She's down here in Farnsport working as like a soldier for the city, like a city, not a soldier, like part of the city watch, and she's keeping it a secret. And we learned a lot more about that. How she just felt like being stuck in the castle as a princess was like being in prison, and so she wanted to go out and see the world so she could be better at being a princess and whatnot. And then Rob, who was like a friend of hers, who's also like a noble's son, came along for like the party as well. Runaway. Yep, run away from home. All right, let's see. He's the heir to the house, like Rymir house. Doesn't come out that much. They both grew up together. We learn more about that later. And so let's see. And then we learn about then we learn about Grimoire shards. And again, the Grimoire shards, as I mentioned before, are the like star levels. So now, since we started the game, we get like 1 star level, so we can pick like a skill to unlock or whatever. Anyway, so the 2 of them have noticed that there's like an armed guy walking around near the front of the city gate, and no one's supposed to bring like weapons in because there's supposed to be like a peace treaty and talks and all that stuff, and so they head off to investigate what's going on with that. So while they're on the way over to take care of that, they find this old man on a bridge. He talks about the war, how he knows that war is the only way. Like, he's known war his whole life. He doesn't know any other way to live his life, and he's kind of upset by the peace treaty. And there's several people throughout the town that you can kind of like chit-chat to. They kind of feel this way. And then Leanne mentions to him how forgiveness is a small price to pay for peace. And he makes some comment about how forgiveness is not a small price. Then a pilot, like a Sky Armor pirate named Rose, shows up. He thanks Leanne for the medicine she gave him for his pregnant wife. So she was able to give birth, and she has a healthy baby girl, and he's so grateful for everything. And then he gets, they're like chit-chatting because they seem to be all kind of friendly and whatnot. And then he gets summoned to meet someone else, and he leaves. Outside the city, we see the guy with the sword wandering off, and we track him down to some ruins. There's an earthquake that occurs, and Rob and Leon talk about how Nysa was destroyed by an earthquake in like this general area of somewhat. They discuss how earthquakes have been occurring more and more recently as of late, and then they spot the guy and his friends. They talk about the goblins that live in this area, and about the thief, like the guy with the sword, talks about the goblins, fighting the goblins in this area, how they're thieves. We then explore this area. We kill some goblins. We find Matthew. Matthew's some guy who seems to be like running this whole show. He has some like guard uniforms for the bandits, so they can sneak in and they can kill Lady Pardnella, which will cause like a problem. At that point, Leanne and Rob like jump out and strike. So during the battle, Matthew like takes the fuck off, and the ground shakes, and the landworm pops up, knocking all the bandits out. A bit later, Rob is interrogating one of the prisoners that survived. And apparently we killed all of them at this guy. And Leon's not a fan of this whole situation and walks up to Rob, like slapping him and ordering him never to like kill people that are like under your that are like your prisoners ever again. what they did reveal before Rob killed them all is that there was a party of nobles who love war because it's good for business, I assume, and they want war to return. They don't want this peace treaty. So these bandits, and on the other hand, believe that Tarn is taking advantage of the peace of the group. So like the nobles who want war because of money are taking advantage of these like peasants essentially who have like strange ideas and like amping up the fire to get them to like do what they want. There's a planned attack Farnsport. It's during like this celebration or whatnot, and they want to start a war to get they want to start a war to get the leaders to go back to war and everything. Let's see. Okay, later on, there's a parade before this like kind of festival starts with all these people coming in, and everything seems fine. So Leanne and Rob talk about having to report to their commander, and that they might have like taken care of the problem, but they still need to like report it in. As they speak, we follow two men who are walking by, Heinlein and Victor. Victor is some kind of noble, and he is sneaking in instead of going in on the parade. Like he's like in the crowd, and him and Heinlein are talking about that. We then get an intro for Victor. He's a noble. He's essentially Shakespeare. Oh yeah, so this game, whenever you get like a character joining your party, you get like a paragraph or two just about like kind of like a brief summary of their history, so you have some idea where they're coming from, which is an interesting way to handle this. And those backgrounds get like vastly expanded on for most characters as you play through the game. Yeah, he's like Shakespeare. He's like, and he's like, as I mentioned before, he's like an elf. They call him ards in this, but they essentially live like 1,000 years. So this guy's been around for a long time. He's very famous. So he's not like a noble because he comes from a noble house. He's treated like royal, like a noble because he's created so much like beautiful like plays and stories and music and all this stuff. And he assisted like the guy who invented the printing press. So he's like, everyone knows who he is. He's super famous. So we take over for him and we just kind of wander around this area for a little bit. And there's like festival games we can play and whatnot. And again, like an homage to Chrono Trigger and how that game opens up. And as we do each one of these like silly games, and one of them's like rock, paper, scissors, literally, we get all these like chips and stuff, and then we can take the chips to like this area in the back and we can get prizes. And so the lady at the front of like the prize tent is like, cool, give me all your chips and then go on and head on inside and you can get all the stuff you want. And Victor's like, awesome. So he heads inside and he's like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And he takes it to like the desk of the person inside the tent and they're like, all right, where are your chips? And he's like, I gave them to the lady working out front. And the guy's like, there's nobody working out front. Wah, wah, wah. Victor's like, what a YOLO, whatever. That's hilarious. So then we switch over to her, and this is Sienna. She's known as the Red Succubus because she's got long, beautiful red hair and a red dress. And they mentioned something about her eye, but like, so there's portraits whenever people talk, which is a nice touch. But like, and you don't see like one side of her face, but I don't see it like. It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like people mentioned like she doesn't have like one eye or she's like something, a scar, but you don't see it. You just don't see anything, right? Anyway. So with her, we get some mini games essentially where we can go around and like steal stuff and cause like chaos and shenanigans. And then we get bothered by like these brothers, this pack of 4 dudes, and 3 of them are like lizard men. So it's exactly like the guys in Final Fantasy 12 who bother like Penelo and Ash is the princess. I don't remember the two guys you start the game with. The guy and like the girl is Penelo, I'm pretty sure, but I don't remember the guy's name. Vaughn. I think it's Vaughn and Penelo. Anyway, and similarly, she has an airship, and they want the airship because she owes them a lot of money. And she's like, "Oh, I lost to gambling." So now we get a reference to Setzer, obviously, Final Fantasy 6. So instead, she's like, "Well, how about instead of my airship, I'm going to break into this palace and get you guys like this thing called the Blue Pearl." And they're like, "How you gonna do that?" And they're like, "Oh, we have a key to the sewer. You can go through the sewer." And she's like, "All right, fine." So at that point, we switch over to a couple of merchants that are just like traveling the roads trying to get into town. And all of a sudden, this like crazy looking fucking monster like pops up and rushes towards Farnsport. Back at Sienna, she's now into the sewers. While in the sewers, she bumps into a Kraken, and then then Killian and Glenn pop up. Because when she's fighting the Kraken, they like pop out because I guess they got ate by the Kraken because they were down there looking for something. So they get introductions for them. We learn that, like the paragraph introductions, we learned that Glenn was born in Golgotha, like not Golgotha, like where Jesus Christ was like suffered and died, or yeah. But it's this giant like walled city that's like a prison for everybody inside, and that there's like he was born there, right? So like his parents like got thrown in there, and then they had a kid. And then when he was able to escape, he joined the Iron Bulls from before, right? Because it's a year later. And for the last year, they've been looking about for clues for this stone that like killed all these people and did all this stuff. And then Killian, he was second in command of the Iron Bulls. He joined up with the Iron Bulls to help make them the strongest army in Eldria, which is like the whole world. So the land Volantis is like the continent. Eldria is like the whole world. It's like 12 continents or something. I don't know. It's like it makes like a clock face. There's like a book you can read in one of the libraries about it. They were only in the Kraken for like a little bit of time, but anyway, so they all drone up together, and then we get to the end of the path, and we hop on a raft, and then we get attacked by the Kraken again, just like in Final Fantasy VI. After beating the Kraken, we then exit the sewer. The three are about to part ways when the screen turns red because, well, there's a fire! The boys explain that there is a riot from a group that is being funded by Prince Tarn, at least that's the rumor they heard, so that he can build up his forces and restart the war. And this matches information that Rob and Leanne found out. Like, we know this, the game doesn't know that. Or the characters in the game know that. So then we switch back over to Victor again, and he's in a ballroom. He mentioned something about an amulet vibrating and a master. Like, oh, the master must be close by. My amulet is vibrating. Then he gets approached by Edgar, who summons some other nobles to chat with him. They mentioned he is an R, and this is where we learn that it's, there's not that many of them, and they live forever. Long-lived race, looks identical to humans. He mentions that he's been alive for 500 years. Someone mentions his magic and how he has magical capabilities, which is unusual because magic is like a rare thing. And then they mention the princess, and the princess is also able to use magic, and this is Princess Amalia, who joins us like much later in the game. And then Victor's like being asked all these questions, kind of harassed by these nobles, and soon enough Heinlein, who's kind of like his butler, like wanders over and like saves him from this like whole group of like interested parties. Then we can wander around, talk to some nobles about stuff that's going on. We learn about this new monotheistic religion that's been kind of building up over the last several years. It's rising up, helping out a lot of people, doing a lot of stuff. There's inquisitors. We meet one of them. We learn that up in Tarn, that Frederick, the crown prince, is actually in charge because the king is like super sick, and that the princess has been missing. And we obviously know she's been missing because she's here acting as a guard because she's Leanne. So it's Princess Celestia. We learn that the Frederick is like a kind of like a cold ruler, if you will. And then we learn that that lady Parinella is somehow related to like Windshire, and that she's around as well. And this is the lady we like protected from like assassination as Leanne and Rob here in Fawn Support. We talked to Princess Amalia, who is, again, my favorite character in this game. And right now, she's just like a princess. She's hanging out. She's doing princess stuff. We chat with her a little bit, chat with other people about how she knows magic, which is like super rare, and people are like kind of concerned about it, or like, oh, look, she knows magic. That's so blah, blah, blah. And that because she's so young, she's like 14 or 15, I think she's 14, that this Sigart guy, the one who kind of introduced us all to the nobles when we first got here, he's the regent, so he's kind of running things for her while she like kind of grows up a little bit more. He also says some like really sketchy stuff, but I feel like it doesn't really go anywhere, to be honest. He might be hinting at like the reason why Amalia knows magic, which is like we find out a lot more about why magic is so rare in this world a bit later on. We also learn that Nabrilla, which is a kingdom in the west, is in a civil war, and that there is kind of like an arms race, or that there is that there's like this king in the east from like the Amharic Empire, and that both the Nabralia, like both Amharic and Nabralia have like eyes on Volantis, because one's to like the east and one's to the west, so it'd be like nice to have like this central location with like all these resources and whatnot. But that King Amharic, he's like a very peaceful king, so they kind of just like chill out in their mountains. It almost like implies that they're kind of like dwarfs to some extent without actually saying it. And then the Nabrilla Empire, because they're in civil war, they're just like minding their own business at this juncture because they got to take care of. They got like two brothers fighting for like control of that continent, and that the whole continent here of Volantis, like even though they've been at like war, whenever there's been like kind of like an interest from the outside, from a different continent, that they've kind of like put their swords down for a minute to like fight off the outsiders. So interesting enough. Then the docent, let's see, okay, yeah, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, it makes sense that like the king of the mountain dwarf king is like not interested because he's just like doing his own thing and living in the mountains and being at peace. And then Abrilia, they've been caught up in a civil war, but they've been caught up in civil war for like 157 years. Like, come on, it's kind of silly. Anyway, we chatted up. We answer some, and then we have to answer some questions. And if we answer like the questions correctly, and a lot of questions are like, oh, who in the court has like magical capabilities? It's like pretty straightforward questions that if you just talk to everybody, you should know. Then you get like a nice little reward. Again, it's not like imperative that you get this reward, but it's like a nice little boost, if you will. It's always nice to have new things. After we finish talking to everybody, we head off with Heinlein, and we jump back to Sienna, who's lurking around the castle. So she's in the storage area looking for this blue pearl thing. And there are some soldiers here, and they're talking about all the thieving exploits. So with Sienna, there's like 3 or 4 different like thieving expeditions you can do like around town before you get caught up by the gang, the little brother gang, and get sent to the sewers. And if you complete all of them, then they leave like a special treasure here because they have to go. They can't like guard it. They have to go like take care of like whatever business and like recover like what's been going on. And they're being like punished for not like taking care of the people or whatever. So we grab that, then we grab some more treasure, and then we find the pearl. And then we jump over to Leanne and Rob. Leanne is complaining about being put in the castle and not being allowed to like go out and do stuff after they reported the commander, especially since there is currently a riot going on in the East Gate, right? So there's more shenanigans going on. Rob is concerned about her being recognized, so he's like very concerned with her being recognized as the princess since there's like the Tarn minister and some other people here. So he's like, no, we should stay here. And then we see the General Matthew, who is the guy from the cave who was trying to pay people off. And now he's in a military uniform, and now they recognize him. They're like, oh, I do know that guy. Now he's wearing that uniform. That's the uniform of Tarn. He's this general. Oh, I remember him. It's been so long that I didn't recognize him, but whatever. They overhear something, and then we switch over to Glenn and Killian. They are searching the records inside the castle for anything about grimoires. All right, so they broke in here and snuck in because they were trying to find information. They were trying to find out more information about grimoires, about the stone, and about all that stuff. At that point, Leanne and Rob like bust in, and Glenn and Killian make a break for it. We head over to the cathedral where Zacharias, who is like a bishop of the church, or like he's not the Pope, but he's like a leader in the church, is leading like a dedicatory prayer or whatever. He finishes when Glenn, Leanne, Rob, and Killian all fall down through like the stained glass windows or whatever, right into the middle of this whole like event. And immediately this Ekar guy recognizes Leanne as princess. Ekar is the diplomat from Tarn, so he's like, Princess Celestia! And it's like, ruh-roh. So the guards surround them, and they're about to fight when Sienna busts up from the sewer grate that is right in the middle of this whole area. And like, why is there a sewer grate right in the middle of like this church where they're doing dedication? It's like, I don't know, whoever. Victor, who's just like hanging out in the audience, steps out and is like super pale with concern. And then there's an earthquake. And then the Inquisitor steps out and announces a monster is coming. Then the crazy monster that the merchant saw before, he breaks out. Oh, no, he breaks the stained glass window right in the middle. And then Glenn is about to fight the demon when the Inquisitor steps in. And every one of our heroes, like all the people we've been jumping between, so Lean, Robert, Sienna, Victor, Killian, and Glenn, they all vamoose right the fuck out of there. And Randolph, who's the Inquisitor, he starts fighting this monster all by himself like a fucking badass. And then we have to fight through a bunch of smaller monsters to get out. And we learn that we can only control 4 party members at a time, but then we have reserve units, and that it costs nothing to switch them out. And in fact, it can lower our overcharge bar, so it doesn't like super overcharge or whatever. So we can set up like an 8-man party, and there's more than, because of the sub members, like the extra members that we can find, there's more. Like again, I think there's like 11 or 12. So, but you can carry up to 8, and you can switch them back and forth. And so for the beginning of the game, I use predominantly Glenn and Leanne because Glenn has an ability that makes people weak to fire, and she's got a fire attack, so that's excellent. And then Victor is a healer, and then Sienna because she's a fucking badass thief samurai. I use Rob virtually never in this game, and Killian I kind of use at the beginning a little bit, but not really that much. He's really not that good compared to like everyone else in the party, so he does get a little bit of use. But Rob, virtually I try to use him and see what's going on there, but his whole thing is like poisoning and stuff, and so he doesn't really get too much play because poison's excellent, but that's like his one-trick pony, and it's just faster just to like power through. So now I imagine again if you're playing this on a harder difficulty, you would use more of him, but I don't. Let's see, members, and then, okay, tag with others and switch, yep. We continue to dash around killing monsters. They're all like kind of flame-oriented. And then eventually the big monster that attacked the Inquisitor, Randolph, he like blasts through and lands, and it's like, oh, we gotta fight this guy. And then Amelia shows up because she's the best, and I love her. She she uses some of her magic. She uses this like awesome like shielding / attack magic thing to like blast it away. And she's like, run away! And so we do. And you never see that spell again because when she joins your party officially later, she's essentially just a healer. Oh man. Anyway, I was like, that's badass as hell. This girl is awesome. She's my favorite. So we climb up this tower. Meanwhile, we see General Matthew. He is walking with Edgar, and he sees an opportunity to get this war started that he's, because we spoiled it before, and that is he stabs like the guards and then kills Edgar behind his back. And then he's gonna like blame it on the people here in Farnsport, and he's gonna use the whole thing with like, oh, there was a monster. Oh, that's what people are saying because they don't want to take, they're trying to like pass blame or whatever. And then meanwhile, we see the Inquisitor. He is being attended to. He waxed poetic about war, about nobles, how they want it to continue. And then we head back over to the crew who are at the top of the tower, and it's a dead end. So we get attacked by this boss monster. And as badass as like Amalia was in like using her magic and Randolph and fighting this thing one-on-one, we beat this thing pretty easily. Then some Sky Armor shows up and like blasts the whole fucking thing away. We then get like some memory of like what happened after the stone was broken the first time. From Glenn's perspective. So there was the explosion, everyone was like killed and dead, but him and Killian were like okay, and he like dragged Killian off, and he has like all this like PTSD from everyone dying and it being his fault and stuff. And then he like just wants to kill himself or be done, and then like Killian and him, this is like, so after that they're together and they want to, Killian's like wants to restart the Iron Bull and like get revenge, and we get the story about like his sister and how she's in a coma and he left to like help her, and like they're using like his family's money, but this family doesn't have like that much money, they're like a family of merchants. And then Glenn just like, he's like barely holding it together, and mostly he just wants to make sure nothing ever happens again with this stone or find out why, like he has a lot of like questions and stuff. And Killian eventually is like, hey, stop being a little bitch, let's go figure this out, and then we can figure it out. And we learn that back in the day there was a lot more magic present, and that wizards would make books called grimoires, and that they always put some sort of gem in the cover, and that for some reason these gems contained like magical powers from like the grimoires or whatever, and like as the books have faded away for like 1,000 years or whatever, the gems remain, and so these gems can like give you powers, and that's like why the gem shards allow us to have like more skills essentially. And this grand grimoire is like the super powerful gem that's like specially made, and there's other gems like that supposedly, but we don't meet any others in this game. And then we learned that the Grand Grimoire did not get destroyed. That something happened, and that it, Glenn is like, after it like blew up, it like rebuilt itself, and then it just like floated the fuck off. And it's like, what? And then Glenn hears like a strange voice that tells him to like wake up, and he sees like this white door, and then he wakes up, and he's with Leon. They have a nice chat about getting rescued by the others. Rob continues being a dick. For like most of the game, to be completely honest. I'm not going to keep bringing it up, but he's just kind of like a dick to everybody. Calls Sienna like a slut or whatever, and tells Glenn he's a piece of shit and stuff like that. And Leon asks Skippy, I'm like, stop being an asshole, stop killing people, what's wrong with you? He offends Sienna pretty hard before Victor gets him to like calm down. Mentions let's see, the sewers were originally, then we find out that the sewers were originally created for like a more nefarious purpose than just like travel or poop. And that we should be careful, and we leave quickly through them. Then at some point, Rob spills beans about Leanne being a lost princess of Tarn. And everyone's like, holy shit, well, whatever, we gotta get the fuck out of here, we'll deal with that later. And so then we vamoose once again. So we continue to travel, and kind of like at the end of the sewers, right before we're about to pop back out of the castle and into like Farnsport, we find this giant statue. And here we get an explanation, and I apologize, I should have brought this up earlier. So one more mechanism of like kind of like leveling up or like customization, which is nice, is that you find these statues, and they're called... I don't remember what they're called, but if you pray to them and you have sacred water, you can like enter a combat, which is like not really, it's like slightly more difficult than like the regular battles around. Then you can get a class emblem, and these class emblems give you like 2 extra skills, active skills, and 2 extra passive skills, along with a whole bunch of like stat bonuses to when they're equipped. And I got like 8 or 9 of them, but I think there's more. So that's pretty nice. Honestly, I like never used the class skills. Well, no. So I used the class skills with Glenn at first, because this first guy you get is like a knight. No, the first one was... What was the first? First one's like another healer, so I just kind of gave it to Victor and then never thought about it again. And then the second one I got was the knight. And then the third is like the vampire, and the vampire kind of sucks. Because it's not like you attack and get hit points back. You can just like self-heal. Like I was like, the fuck is... Why is this called the vampire? Anyway... The when you're playing on the easy difficulty, the class emblems are completely like they don't do shit all. Like again, it's like a lot of the skills they give you are like redundant skills, so you can like more customize characters. But at some point, it's like for me, and this is a tangent from the story of the game, I don't like having too much customization, to be completely honest. Like if I'm playing like Skyrim, right, then I want to be able to build the character I want to build, but I want to be able to specialize in things and whatnot. I don't necessarily want to have like some old bullshit when it comes to, like, I really don't like, the worst part to me about like Final Fantasy VI versus like Final Fantasy IV is, and I'm skipping 5 because 5 is all about, you know, it's the classic, like the point of 5 and like 3 and tactics is like you're building your team how you want to build them, right? And I don't really like that. Like I'm not the biggest fan, but that's like the point. And so you can kind of like in your head, you can make characters very specific in like a certain kind of way. The thing I don't like about 6 that makes it worse than like 5 and 3 and tactics and stuff is that each character has their own individualized like personality and situation, and not just like from a story perspective, but like, you know, they have like a specific weapon, a specific like sub skill or sub skills, and then you have like the bullshit magic, right? And it's like, it's just magic, and everyone can get access to magic, and it makes sense in the plot, but I just don't like it. And this makes it like a whole nother level of like, you're already like, there's only like, you have like 20 active skills, 20 passive skills. Most people like if you have like save TP, which means you use less TP, there's like 5 people who have access to that skill, and I just don't like it. Like I like each character to be individualized. That's my favorite kind of JRPG, right? That's why I don't really like you talk about like Chrono Trigger versus Chrono Cross. Chrono Trigger is like, I don't think anyone would argue really that Chrono Cross is a better game, because it's just not at all. I like it a lot, but my biggest complaint about it is it's just like the characters, like you have like 100 characters and they're all just like the same character with like very slight variations. Like it's like, don't have 100 characters if they're all going to be virtually the same. You can just slot them, they just look different and have like 1 or 2 different abilities. Like I want my characters, I know I have a core cast of characters that are all like very unique, even if it's like I hand make them unique, right? And that's why to me like Final Fantasy IV is one of the best, and even games like Final Fantasy 15, like the games that are more story oriented and that have like very specific like character sets and capabilities and skills, like the early like the Dragon Quest games, for example, I love way more, because I feel like you make the skills with the character in mind as a developer, and it like relates more to their personality, and it kind of helps establish, like build the story, instead of just having like a hodgepodge, like whatever the fuck you want. Now, in terms of like Final Fantasy 5 and 3 and tactics and such, it makes sense. So I'm less like offended by it, because it's like, well, the point of the game is like these characters are kind of like ciphers. Even Final Fantasy 1, right? Like it's just like you just make your party and then you roll with it. Like it's very like old school Dungeons and Dragons, like Gold Box era kind of role playing games. And I'm fine with that, because then it's like it becomes like a headcanon. Like I have Butts Face, and Butts Face is like the greatest wizard of all time with his like fucking staff and stuff, right? But you're like making that character, and you can have like an old fighter character party and stuff like that. I'm cool with that. But when it becomes this like hodgepodge of like kind of whatever, YOLO it, it's like, I don't know, I feel like you do a disservice to the character and story. Personally, for me, like I get less enjoyment out of it. So the fact that you have all these skills, and like, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just like, well, this is a healing character, I'm just gonna use her healing skills. And I like, the characters are well written enough in this that it doesn't like irk me too much. It's more so like a complaint generally about this like concept that you have to have like infinite customization when it comes to like characters and games. And it's like, I feel like I'd rather just have like, this is this character, this is what they do, than have like everybody has access to like cure 1. Like, no, I want a healer in this fucking party that like that is what she does, and she has a bow and arrow and it's badass as hell, right? Like that's what I want. I don't want like, oh, you can have this, you want like a double-handed sword and for them to be like a black mage? Awesome, do that. I'm like, nah, boring. That's boring. Unless it's like I'm making a character for the whole game, right? And I'm hand designing that character to be like a certain way. Then it's like I'm more cool with the idea of it, right? Okay. Anyway, I just wish characters were more like, there was more like nurturing care to designing their capabilities, instead of just kind of like, whatever, they're a fighter, they have like fighter shit, this other person also has fighter shit. It gets real boring, is all I'm trying to really say here at the end of the day. But yeah, okay, so where were we? Oh yeah, the statue. So so you find this statue, he explains that we need sacred water, we can pray to it, we do that, we get the class emblem, and At that point, we we switch over to Farron. Yeah, we switch over to Farron. Farron is the captain of the guards here in Farnsport, and he's interrogating some prisoners about the plot and about everything. They confess to wanting to stab Lady Parnella, and we find out that not only was Lady Parnella killed, that Edgar was killed as well. And it's like, oh, fuck, man. So they discuss how this is going to affect Princess Amalia and everything, and she mentions getting Celestia as a hostage. Or no, she mentions getting Celestia as a hostage to kind of stop the war from going on, because she knows that Leanne was Princess Celestia, and she's being very cold and calculating at this point because, she's got to be. She's like the princess or whatever. And they talk about how Frederick would never endanger his sister, so if they can get her back over here to Farnsport, they can kind of like maybe extend and avoid the war or whatnot. So then back over to the crew, Victor mentions that Farnsport. And this is one of the few writing parts that was really bad, because then we had this whole conversation with Amalia and Farah's and stuff, and then we go over to Victor, and he's having the exact same conversation with the crew, but it's like an extended conversation. Like if it was just like, so that's why I think that we have to get out of Farnsport, because they're going to likely want to take Leanne as a hostage, and then they move on, I'd be like, fine. But he like explains the whole like reasoning like all over again, so it's like we get the reasoning twice, and I was like, this is kind of bad writing. Let's see. Anyway, so Victor mentions sneaking around and out of here and then heading up to Tormund, which is the capital of Terran, and so that Leanne can try to talk to her brother and talk him out of the war and stuff. But there's a lot of monsters, so we're gonna have to like stick together so we can make sure we take care of all that. But then here's the voice from Other telling him that him and Killian need to go help Leanne, and then that's very important. And then he mentions opening a door as well. Sienna, on the other hand, is like, all right, adios, bitches. But then as she's trying to walk off, she sees that the little gang that's after her from Final Fantasy 12, and she's like, hold up, maybe I'll come with you. And then Rob just continues being an asshole. But nonetheless, they all depart together, and this is like our party going forward. So we meander around Farnsport a little bit. We learn a little more about game mechanics. We run into a cartographer. He's an old friend of Victor. He wants to like map out the region, and with the new war going on, it's going to make it harder. So he wants us to like help him out. So we're like, yeah, sounds good, buddy. And so this is where we get like the reward board that I was mentioning earlier. So now we access that, and he kind of goes around and shows us like, oh, outside there's like areas that have like you break the and they always look the same, so it makes it pretty simple. You like against like walls, like cavern walls or whatever, you will find areas that you can like bash open, and it leads to treasure. And then sometimes on the ground there'll be these little like arrow things, and there'll always be 3 arrows pointing in different directions, and you can find 2 of those on the map. And then if you figure out where like 2 of the 3 arrows, like 1 arrow on each is going to be pointing at the same area, and if you go to that area and like click like just the action button, you'll dig up treasure, right? And then monsters, and he introduces us to like heroic monsters, or what do they fucking call in this game? And the heroic monsters, there's like unlock scenarios for a lot of them in a lot of these areas, and you have to like join the Adventurers Guild, because they'll give you hints on how to like unlock the super monsters, and they'll give you super abilities. And then if you go back to the Adventurers Guild after you destroyed like a super monster, they'll give you like rewards for it and stuff. So that's all fun, and so we get a lot of that from the cartographer, and such. Let's see. So then we wander around and we do some of these side quests and to fill up the board and whatnot. And at some point we rescue this lady who lives in Basel, which is like a nearby town on the way up to Tormund. And then we help this guy who is like, it's like Don Quixote kind of situation where he's like, I had to go fight the windmill because it's a monster and it's attacking, and his wife's like super concerned, and so we go up to like help him out, and then it's like, holy shit, the windmill is a fucking it is a monster. It's a mimic. It's an easy monster. We just like slap it around a little bit, and then it dies and goes away, and the guy's like, oh, thank God, like I thought I was losing my mind, but like you proved that I wasn't, because it's a mimic. And I was like, that's cool. We never seen any mimics again, which I feel like was could have come back to be very interesting at a later point, or to like hide more secrets. But it is what it is. It was a fun little thing to do, so I have no real complaints about the situation. We then learn that, then we get to the checkpoint, and to get through the checkpoint, we need like a pass. But how do we get this pass? We learned that there's a guy named Becker who lives over in Basel as well, and that he is like a merchant, or no, he's some sort of like representative of like the government down here in like Esquione or whatever. And so if we talk to him, he can maybe give us a pass, and we can use the pass to get through the mountains, and we can get up to Tormund or whatever. So we got to go figure that out. And then we head over to Basel, and then we find that, hey, it's a lady we saved. And she talks about how Becker is like a real asshole and that you shouldn't trust him. And then she gives us like a little reward as well. And then we also find a fisherman guy whose home was attacked by monsters. we run around here a bit, do some side quests or whatever, and finally hit up the Becker guy with for the passives. He's doing some kind of rehearsal, dinner or rehearsal for his wedding. And so he's like, yeah, just take the passes over there. But there's only 4 of them, so Victor pays for it. And it says we'll just go kind of figure it out because there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 6 of us, yes. So Sienna has a lot of questions about this whole thing, and she mentions that the passes seem like way too cheap for what they are. And on the other way, the border, we get accosted by this Jan guy, who he's the guy who had the like fishing shack and his with like kind of like their monster claws over the place. He mentions that he has real passes and checks out ours and tells us they're fake. We then go check with the guard, and they are fake, but we're not the first ones to come with fake passes from Becker. Seems pretty strange. Why would he do that? Why would he issue fake passes? So it's time to go check it out. We head back over to Becker. We find some other merchants with the same issues. Guys clearly came before us. Becker claims that they're real, that we're fucking with him, and then we bring it up. And then he says, we talk about Jan, and he says, Jan's a thief. He probably switched the real passes for the fake passes. And as soon as we're like walking out of the building, we see him running away from Becker's place. So we track him down, and he's being attacked by monsters. Once we kill them, Killian like picks him up and like threatens him. But Sienna's like, no, let's hear this motherfucker out. So he tells us that Becker is a thief, that he uses bandits to rob people up in the pass. So he sells real passes, but the passes take you up this path. And so once the passes take you up, he gives you the passes, and then he sends like his little bandit troop to go like ambush people. So when they get through the gate or the guard, then they get jumped, and then he gets the passes back and brings them back. So it's like, and then he resells all the stuff that he stole from them. So we take the real passes. We mentioned going back to Becker. Before we do that, Glenn mentions that the house, he's like, hey, by the way, this house looks like it was attacked by monsters. Or your house looks like it was attacked by monsters. So Jan freaks out and runs off, so we follow him. Inside, he's yelling, trying to find his daughter. We find a bunch of dead Tarn soldiers, and eventually his daughter like comes out of hiding. We learn that Jan needed the passports for these soldiers. They took his daughter hostage, and they said only get her back because they were trying to like sneak, because the whole thing with Farnsport and the war and everything, they were trying to sneak back across the border, but they can't get through the border without the passes. So they're using him to get the passes. And so that's why he was trying to get enough passes for them. But now that this beast has killed him, his daughter's freed. But he doesn't know what the beast is. We don't know what the beast is. No idea. We get the information like way later in the game, like at the very end of the game, if we really want to come back and kind of figure that out. But for now, we're going to head back over to Becker. At Becker's, he's right in the middle of his wedding rehearsal, and we break that shit up. And his bandits are there, so we fight and kill them. He mentions some purple temple thing, which is a secret path that his guys use to get to Katara, since like the pass situation's not going to work out because he doesn't even have enough passes for all of us. And then he gives us the key. So the bandits would go through this like purple temple thing to get to the ambush point, right? So now we can use that. Temple there's pretty straightforward. There's some ghosts and stuff. There's boss at the end, which is called the Dream Killer. He constantly changes the background, which is fun. New powers and such. Once down, we head into a dark cave, and then Glenn starts to have like a real struggle session. The team decides it's a good time to rest, and everyone has like a nice little chat. Princess Celestia, or Leanne, talks about herself wanting to be a better princess, experience in the world, all that stuff. We learn that Rob was trained as a ranger, that like his way like 1,000 years ago or something, his like ancestors lived in the woods and trained as rangers, and so after they were able to like take over and become like nobles and get their own house and everything, that every son has to go out in the woods for like a year and train as a ranger, so family tradition and whatnot. Glenn and Killian share their story, well, like most of it. They don't talk about the destruction of the stone and how they were really involved. They just talk about how they were part of a mercenary band and stuff. and then and all the rest. Then we head out the mountains and wander around for a bit. We see a force of Taran led by General Matthew guarding a bridge, and Leon's like, I can convince him to let us through and help us out. So she goes over there. They start arguing. He claims that she's telling a fake story and that she's a fake princess, and orders the guards to kill her. And then Ro, if you remember Ro showed up for a minute at the very beginning of the game with Leanne and Rob. He's part of like the guard, and he was a Sky Armor pilot. He shows up in his Sky Armor pilot, and he's like, I'm here to help. And then Glenn gets one of those like things that he gets where it's like a voice speaks in his head and he sees a white door, and it's like, do not trust that motherfucker. And so Glenn shouts and jumps and grabs Leanne, who dodges out, or he yells at Leanne, who dodges out of the way right before Ro grabs her, because remember, Ro is under command of the Princess Amalia, who ordered that Leanne be picked up for hostage negotiations or whatever, so that there wouldn't be a war. And then Ro like loses it about like saving his family and saving his wife, and he can't live through another war, and that Leanne needs to come with him, so hostage stuff or whatever. So it's time to fight. Once we beat his ass, he screams out and is super upset, and then his Sky Armor explodes and he dies. But this explosion like destroys the bridge, which crashes everybody down into like a chasm. We pick up with Rob. He's all alone. He freaks out. Oh no, so Rob is the only one who doesn't get blasted into the chasm. He like freaks out and jumps on down. And then we get like a Final Fantasy VI throwback. So if you ever played Final Fantasy VI, there's a portion where all the main characters have to split up, and you get like 3 different adventures. You can do them in any order. It doesn't really matter or whatnot. So we get a similar thing here. So we get a choice to choose one of like the 3 cute little adventures here and go through them. So I start with Victor, Killian, and Rob. So we pick up with Victor. He mentions that his amulet is still glowing, which means that like Leanne and Glenn are okay. And no one really questions that, which is odd. But, oh no, he says it to himself. He then overhears Killian and Rob like talking. So Rob is like really freaking out. They calm down. And then they talk about how the group agree that they're going to meet at the White Rose Inn. So they should still head there, and then everyone else meet up with them. And I don't ever remember them talking about this beforehand, so I was like, okay, well, that's new information to me, but fair enough. And every group mentions this place, so I guess, like, I don't know why you just didn't add it earlier and then have it here, but maybe they did, and I just didn't read through it. The 3 find their way to the Weingard mines, which are a part of Rob's family estate, apparently. As we're moving around, we see this giant worm, like, scorching its way all over the place, and it's called, like, the Megalian worm, and they talk about how it's probably the one causing all the recent earthquakes and whatnot. There are some fun platforms that we have to go through. So like we're in like a mine, we walk around like a normal like a dungeon, right? And then every now and then we'll get on like a minecart, and the minecart has like a battle system where it's like you get a little map that you can look at, and then as you fight every turn or so you move like a square, and in certain squares if you don't like hit the controls to move like left or right or up or down instead of like the direction you're going, then you will like crash or die or get like debuffs or whatever for this kind of like mini boss you fight through, which is super fun. I like that. And you go through a couple of those, and then at the very end there's like this drilly boy. And then we head up the mountain. Victor gets kind of nostalgic as we pass by this big hole in the mountains, and he mentions that this is where Nysa was. And Nysa was the old scholarly town that used to exist here that was like the center of like magic for the whole world. And at some point it just like sunk into the ground, and then like one of the true kings, like true king number 7, I think, like the dragon. Actually, his name's like Ademic, I think. And then he's like he might be True King 2. We get a whole like story about the True King, so I'll talk more about that later. But it's like a very important part of like the lore of this world. It's not that important. It's like very important, like right at the end of the game, just for like, it's like, wow. But then it doesn't like play too much of a role necessarily in like this. Like this game, as a side note while we're here, is like heavily set up for like a sequel that I don't know if this guy's even working on. So, but... And that's kind of like what disappointed me with the DLC was it's like it's not just like a side story. It's pretty much a side story that takes place during the game, but it like takes you. It can't just be played during the game, which I find kind of annoying because I should have just been able to like take care of that story during the game. Instead, it's like a pseudo sequel, which I despise. And again, I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But that's kind of the reason I'm not a big fan of all this stuff going on. Anyway, all right. And yeah, so Victor, like 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, he studied here. It was destroyed 500 years ago, so I think he was here like 1,000 years ago. Killian asks about the earthquake being the cause, and he's like, no, there was a shield that protected the city. And then Killian inquires about seeing if the city is still down there. And the Rob states that it's kind of impossible. There's like wyverns and a miasma, and it's like a sure rock face. So there's like really no way to get down there. Oh, the dragon's name is Asinadil, one of the 7 true kings. Rob and Killian start to get into it again. After Rob calls Killian a thief for like the 20 fucking time, and then an arrow interrupts them. And it's Thomas. He's a lion man. He and Rob know each other. Toma used to work for Rob's father until he couldn't pay the knights anymore. And there's this whole big conversation about like Rob, his kingdom. There might be a side quest I just missed about this, but we get a lot of conversation about like Rob, his family, his father, how his father like betrayed like the king, and so that's why Rob was like essentially kidnapped and put like as a hostage in like the king's home, and that's how he met Leanne and stuff, and how like the king is like Rob's father was not able to like pay these guys, and so then they became like bandits and whatnot, and all this stuff, and then like it never comes up again in the game. Like Rob almost never gets broached for like the rest of the game, and I'm like, there's like a whole story here that like I feel like just got dropped. Anyway, so once Rob and crew killed Toma. So Rob is about to kill Toma, like he loves killing people, right? And Victor stops him, and they separate, and then we switch over to like another group. So next I choose Leanne and Glenn. Glenn is just like passed down on the ground, and Leanne is trying to wake him up. He awakens, and she fills him in on like what's been going on. They review the mission and how Matthew will be looking for her, so they have to go to the White Rose Inn to meet up with everybody else. On the way to the mountain, we spot some sky armors. Glenn gets nerdy about talking about the exact model and everything. And Leon notices that some civilians are being mistreated by the Terran forces. She mentions that Lord Gustav Reimer is a character allied with Tarn, and that is Rob's dad, and that they should avoid this place. Leon also mentions that he initially rebelled against, and this is where we learn about how he initially rebelled against the king, was completely shut down, so then Rob became a ward or hostage. So that's how they grew up together. And then he was treated worse than, like the serving staff treated him like shit. Like, he wasn't treated like a nobleman's son, he was treated like complete garbage. And then we have to like avoid combat during this portion because Glenn is like still injured. And eventually they set up camp. They talk about Frederick, who is the prince, who is Leon's brother, and how she's going to try to figure out what's going on, see if she can stop the war. She starts to promote being a princess and stuff. And then Glenn's like, oh, I can relate. And it's like, no, you can't. He talks about growing up in a prison and how they both felt like restrained, like they couldn't do anything. They couldn't like be themselves, and how they were constantly under like scrutiny and stuff. And then he mentions like the Kadar Exodus, which we get no information about for the rest of the game, and how it like freed him. Once he was freed, he didn't know what to do with himself, but then he kind of joined the Iron Bulls. And she mentions promising to reward him and Killian when they get to Tarn, but he's like, yeah, Killian probably wants an award, but I don't want that. And she's like, what do you want? And he's like, I want to find out more about the explosion. And he talks about how he was in the middle of the explosion and how he was saved, and like but everything else was like atomized, except for him and Killian. He then copes to trying to find out more he then talks about wanting to find more information about the grimoires. And then we fall asleep. We're waking up early the next morning by some guys. It's a woman named Sreda. And apparently we're in some sort of like holy forest. And anyone who enters the forest is sentenced to death. And she mentions how her village, Waylond, has been attacked by some beast. And that if we can help like defeat the beast, then maybe they can like look the other way about like our sacrilegious nature. At that point, Glenn hears a voice, and it's like, you should not help them. But we decided to help anyway, as otherwise they're just going to execute us. We wander around here, talk to some of these villagers that are just like hanging out about the monster and whatnot. And then Glenn sees like a fairy light. So Leanne and him follow it till they get to like this pool of water. And then Glenn gets the voice again in his head that's like, do not go any further. And then Leanne is like, YOLO, I'm going to go take a look in the pool. And the voice tells Glenn again to focus because this is a trap from the monster. And he tells Leanne to dodge out of the way again at the very last second. We then hear the spirits laughing and the battle begins. With my two best characters and their little combo of oil and fire, I absolutely just destroyed this fucking guy so fast. It's out of control. Boom! So Leanne notices Glenn looks really bad at this juncture, right? He was like barely walking before. And the voice tells him that this monster and the one at the feast were born of this earth specifically to kill him, which is interesting because it doesn't really come up again for the rest of the game, right? So, okay, there's not like any other crazy monsters that come trying to hunt him down. Kind of odd. Anyway, that ends this portion of the story and leaves us with Sienna. She is like, fuck this shit, I'm out. She overhears some soldiers talk about making wanted posters of everybody, and she's like, fuck, I'm back in. Specifically because they're like, I don't remember what anyone looks like. Oh wait, there's that red-haired girl. And then they describe her to a T, and this is where we find out she has like something with her eye or a scar or something, and I was like, really? Anyway. And part of the reason is because she's hot as shit. So they're like, oh, yeah, I remember her. She was awesome. So anyway, so she's like, all right, fine. I'll go to this White Rose Inn and meet up with everybody and rescue the princess, whatever. That way maybe they can like get rid of these wanted posters. And the whole thing was kind of like silly. This game really hasn't been that silly, but like whatever. She eventually works her way over to Rock Bottom, which is this town where she overhears some merchants talking about Terran soldiers taking over the town. There's also lots of bandits and stuff. And then she sees one of her old friends from the beginning of the game. Too easy. So we sneak around. We find the King of Thieves, Nojin, in his palace. And he's got like his whole harem of hotties, and he's talking to the Black Sun Gang, and the Black Sun Gang is like the Final Fantasy 12 guys, about Sienna specifically. So we sneak past them when we find a mercenary Sienna knows, Bath Raz, and to get him to join our party, we have to pay him. So we got to go find some money because the money I have on me is no good. And that happens a bit in the game. Like every now and then, in the past, I've mentioned like Victor pays for it, or like sometimes later Amalia, when she finally joins the party, will like, oh, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. It's like the funds you have are not like real funds; they're funds just for the game, and that's kind of an interesting thing. Also, I don't know. I'm I'm not like a super big fan of it. Like you have control over this, right? But it does remind me of like Breath of Fire, the original one, because there's like a thing where it's like you want something, you got to go get like a lot of money for it. And I remember the first time I played the game, I had to like really fucking grind out to get all this money. Like it was not an easy task to do. But anyway, so Bathraz is awesome. He's like a lizard man with no limbs, and he's got this like metal stuff that helps him like move around, and all his weapon attacks are like summoning weapons to attack. And he's the guy I mentioned before that has like immediately has light and dark magic as his base level attacks. And so I pretty much put him in my main party and use him throughout the rest of the game. He kind of pulls like a Shadow from Final Fantasy VI, where he like joins here because we pay him, and then he like nopes out for a while, but then he comes and joins like the party for realsy later on. And it's not like, oh, he's a hidden character that you can not get, like Shadow was in Final Fantasy VI. Like in the second half of the game, you can just like totally lose him by abandoning him on the island like an asshole. But in this, it's like he will join, and he joins because he is very essential to like the main thrust of like the main story. A lot more than like Sienna, that's for damn sure, or Rob. Like the main characters that are really necessary for this game to like take place are Glenn, Leanne, Victor, Bathraz, Amalia, and that's it. Yep. So everyone else can just be like temporary joiners. They kind of play roles, sort of, maybe, but not like super, super duper important and whatnot. I mean, Sienna being around like at the end of the game is like kind of important, but that whole section was kind of silly. Let's see. Oh, and he talks about the curse that gives him magic. So that's like the second or third time like having magic and being cursed comes up. But so the way we find the treasure is we got to go break into Nogent's like back door and get into his treasury, and then we steal a whole bunch of money and then take it back to Bathraz, and then he joins us. Next, we got to get disguises so we can sneak on out of here. So we head to the shop where this pig man is sleeping. Bathraz jacks some armor for us, and then we use it to sneak past the guards. And then Sienna makes a comment about not liking the armor as it reminds her of something. We head out of Rock Bottom, then run into Nogent and his men again. He wants his money back and the amulet that we stole. As they try to take it back, Sienna strikes out. Then we fight. We beat the guy that he sent, and then Nogent offers Bathraz double the money, and he's like, okay, sure, sounds good. And then he attacks Nogent's guys and beats the shit out of them, like on his own, like we don't fight that battle. And then we escape. Once clear, Bathraz is like, all right, adios. I did what you paid me to do. Bye. And so he nopes out as Sienna tries to argue him back in about the deal and the cost and such, but he leaves regardless. Later, now that we've completed all three of these missions, all the companions have reunited at the White Rose Inn. Everyone's celebrating. Rob apparently is a super lightweight. Glenn is the fun police. And we do get an opportunity to talk to everybody. Just get a little bit more background on people. We find out Killian has family money. Oh yeah, we find that out. We find out Sienna has an airship and a crew member, Haku, who's like, she came from like some other country or whatever. And he's like taking care of the airship right now, and that they were supposed to meet in Farnsport, but like something happened with like, I mean, obviously something happened. Victor talks about it used to be like hundreds of years ago, like a member of like a traveling musical troupe before, magic started happening within him, and then he went to Nysa to train under this guy Bartholomew. And then Leanne talks about traveling around, like how her and Rob like left the castle and how they like barely survived. And it's all pretty good writing. At that point, we hear a scream, and we're like, "Oh shit, we gotta go!" And Leonard's like, "Oh no, it's just the flowers." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's just the flowers?" And so he takes us outside, and there's this beautiful like garden of white flowers. And when you step on them, they make like this human screaming sound, which is haunting. He loves it because he's a fucking creep. He talks about spirits and how they all go back into the vortex or the maelstrom. Which is like a thing in this game. So everyone's got like their spirits have like ether, and when you die, the ether goes back into like the pool of Maelstrom, and then it eventually like cycles around for a bit and then pops back out. And then sometimes people have they'll have memories of like past lives that their little spirit had based on like the ether. Like it's not supposed to be like a reincarnation thing per se, but every now and then people have these things, and guess what they're called? That's right, echoes. So it's the name of the fucking game. What do you think it was going to be called, dumbasses? Anyway, so the next morning, excuse me. The next morning, Rob. Oh no, and then he also tells us that like everything has this like these spirits in it, and everything has ether, and when the ether returns, that's like the resurrection or whatever, right? So even flowers and the rocks and the trees and all that shit have ether as well, and so. There you go. The next morning, Rob and Killian are arguing, as they do, about Toad's soup. And then Sienna comes out and mentions that, hey, Leon's gone. And the innkeeper states, oh yeah, she got up early this morning, left in a hurry. So we're like, oh shit, we better go find her. When we're out in the woods, we find a merchant or somebody who mentions that no one has come by him, but there's a village up ahead, so maybe we could go over there. So we go and check out this village. and everyone's like super concerned that we got to like really hurry up. So in the town, we wander around and start talking to people, and then we get like a quest where we're supposed to like find out some shady stuff about somebody. And the more we talk to people, the more we realize that the innkeeper that we just left is shady as fuck. That there were like some weird experiments going on, and that, you know, there's been like missing people for a while and all that stuff. And this is where we find the book that talks about how the whole world is like in a ring, like a clock or whatever. And it goes through all the kingdoms and continents, which is like some pretty interesting stuff. I'm not really going to go over it here because it is irrelevant to this game. Like maybe if this guy makes a future game in this world, which when we get to the ending, you'll see like that probably is on his mind at somewhat or whatever, because the game just kind of like, okay, time to do the next thing, the end. And I'm like, wait, what about the next thing? And then the DLC comes out, it has nothing to do with it. And I was like, wah, wah, wah. Anyway, but it's all pretty interesting. It's like the world's like pretty fleshed out. This person clearly spent a lot of time like thinking about it and like wondering about certain things. So we head over to the innkeeper and we see him go into like the back of the inn, and so we follow him into like a secret passage. We find some notes about experiments that are being performed, and it's like more and more this guy's like super sketchy. At the end of this like dungeon basement thingy, we find Leanne. She's totally okay, but she's been tracked by the innkeeper. And then he traps us in there as well. And he talks like a fucking Bond villain. He reveals like his master plan. He talks about how like the ether in the world has been like getting worse because there's like more population and there's only a certain amount of ether for the whole world. And the more people like have children, the more the ether is like spread out or whatever. And so he's trying to find a way to like recapture the ether so that magic can be like make magic great again or whatever, pretty much, by any means possible. And then after he like spills the beans, Sienna's like, all right. And she just like kicks open the fucking prison door that the guy trapped us in and is like, ta-da! And he's like, ay! And then he runs off, and so we chase him down, and outside he's like with all the flowers and stuff. Oh yeah, and he's got this girl, Arlette, that just kind of hangs out with him. And he's like, Arlette, take care of that. And he like pokes her with something or whatever. And so she glows and is full of like magical energy, so we gotta fight her. And then once we do that, she like lights the whole field of flowers on fire, and then Donbert like freaks out because this is like his greatest experiment was like the flowers or something, and so he like stumbles out into the flowers and like burns to death. It's pretty dark. Also, we learned that these flowers are the reason they scream is not because of like some bullshit like hippie nonsense about the plants having souls. It's because he literally combined like human souls with plants like a lunatic. At that point, Victor goes up and heals Arlette, but she needs much more care, so we take her over to the city of like Identity or Iden. There she gets the help that she needs from a doctor. We talk to the villagers who are all super grateful, and then some like asshole general from Tarn speaks up. He's super fucking drunk. He talks a lot of shit, and a villager attacks him and gets the shit kicked out of him. And then Glenn's like, I've had enough, and he beats the shit out of him, like knocks him the fuck out, like One Punch Man style. And with that, we make our departure. Elsewhere, there's these two soldiers talking. One is the Inquisitor Raphael from the banquet before, and the other is this chick named Ava, who's also an Inquisitor. She has a lot of concerns about that the poor houses are being closed down, which is causing a lot of crisis of faith among the populi. Raphael's like, hey man, that's up to the Pope, like stay in your fucking lane. Then the new guy wanders up, his name's Wyatt, he's another Inquisitor, and he's a big ass boy. They all three of them go see the Pope, and the Pope is sketchy as fuck. Like he's got kind of like the black mage, like dark face with like, you can't see his face, you just see darkness and a couple of eyes and whatnot. And so, and then he says like some really sketchy shit. And he's very upset that Raphael is there. Raphael apologizes and says that he will return to Valandis immediately, so clearly they're not in Valandis right now. They are interrupted by a messenger who comes to announce a visitor, Marcus. And then the Pope's like, oh, it's Marcus, we gotta go. So they meet up, the Pope and the Inquisitors roll in, and there's like these subdivision commanders. And we find out that this church that the Pope is like running is just part of like this greater organization. The Pope argues with these other guys, and then Marcus like interrupts everybody. Raphael mentions that the red-eyed beast, and then that like attacked the banquet, and then Marcus gets very concerned and sends everyone but Raphael away. Marcus then says some cryptic shit about her. He then tells Raphael that Raphael is now under his direct command, that he reports directly to Marcus, not the Pope anymore. And that the only two differences that are different, because he's still going to go back and he's still going to do like his mission of Inquisition or whatnot. But first things first, he needs to find the grave of Lady Rana, who is like the Holy Mother, and then who is like the previous Holy Mother or something, or has something. And then he needs to find the actual living Holy Mother, who is the Princess Celestia, like reincarnated. and that she's the foundation of their faith. We learn that many, many, many years ago, the whole world was divided and fighting, and a terrible thing arose from the earth to destroy everything. But the Holy Mother, under the guidance of God, sealed the evil, right? And that's the mythology he's going with, even though none of it's true. With the and now that the Holy Mother is back, the seal is about to break, and the final battle can commence with the good versus evil. We then take control back of our friends out here. We explore the woods for a while. We unlock the vampire class, which sucks dick. Rob and Victor talk to Sienna about surviving on her own for this long and all this stuff, and how she got like to meet up with everybody when she was all by herself. She mentions Bethraz, and Victor's like, oh, Bethraz, nice, since he clearly knows him from somewhere else. And after all this chatting about and meandering about and doing all this stuff, we finally arrive in Tormund, the capital city of Tarn, where it never stops raining. We hear there is a speech incoming, so we head with the rest of the populace to go check it out. Up on this balcony, fortress-looking thing, we see a couple of generals, Alina, Gustan, and Kenric. They're all a bunch of weirdos. Like, Kenric's like some bald old man. Alina looks like a rejected, Jinx from League of Legends. And then Gustan's like, I don't know, he's like a fish man. He's some sort of goo inside like a helmet, like a water, like a fish tank or something. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Anyway, Frederick then comes down. He's Leon's brother, and then he shows up with like the white-haired guy from the prologue. He gives this rousing speech about how war is necessary, and he mentions how the war is not going to last long, but they're going to like show everybody they don't fuck with Tarn and all that stuff. And so now they have the Grand Grimoire, which they took from Gravos. Victor mentions that this is a lie, that Tarn's always had it, that they never like took it away. And then Glenn is like, what the fuck, really? You know about that? And then Victor's like, yeah, I'll tell you later. But first, we got to go meet somebody. So we escort Leanne to the palace. Frederick is super excited. He loves his sister. He's super glad she's back again and all that stuff. And she reveals that it was a monster, not the soldiers who killed everyone. And then Gwaine, the white-haired guy, like the white-haired guy who was there at the prologue and was hanging out with Frederick before, comes up and is like, yeah, we know that. And Matthew then comes in and tells this story about the demon, and then after the attack, Ekkar was killed. Leanne gets super upset because that's not what happened, and then Matthew continues to talk about how she's confused. Frederick tells her that she needs to go relax and freshen up, and then he'll come see her this evening. They can talk some more, and the rest will be put in like the finest rooms. They all leave, and then Matthew turns to Frederick and says it's hard to lie. It is hard to lie to the princess, and Gwaine thanks him, as Leanne would be distraught if she knew Frederick was behind this whole thing. Dun dun dun. Yep. Frederick then calls Matthew to step forward, and they discuss how Leanne is the most honest person in the whole world, and she had mentioned the whole bridge incident where he like attacked them and whatnot, and so he needs to be punished for that. As when because he tried to like kill her and whatnot, which he actually did. So they cut off his arm and they take off one of his eyes, and they don't want to execute him because it'd make it look too suspicious, and they need like unity among the ranks. Anyway, so then we head over to Glenn. We learn that Sienna and Killian are out exploring the city while Leanne and Rob are in the palace. Glenn's like really nervously walking around waiting for Victor to bring him the person so we can tell him about the grimoires and all that stuff. But before that, we get to like wander around a little bit. We find Killian on the roof of a building. We talk to him about how he just wants to change the world, how he grew up in like a merchant family and everything was pretty good until his sister's horse went wild and ended up taking her to like the poor part of town where she got raped a lot, and it did so much rape that it put her in a coma that she's still in. And he doesn't blame the rabble for the rape and all that stuff, which is kind of insane, but he blames like the situation that people were put in, like with the wars and like the rich versus the poor, and just like that they didn't know any better. And I'm like, that's some bullshit, crazy nonsense. you lunatic. Anyway, so he wants to get the Grand Grimoire to use it to make the world like a better place. And he's wondering it's wandering around. We get another scene with Leanne and her brother and her father like in a wheelchair because he's like close to death. And they both discuss what happened at Farnsporth, as well as her telling the truth about everything. She then makes a comment about her father's hands and how they feel tough, but she guesses they always were, considering that he held a sword more than he held his daughter. We then click back over to Glenn, who thinks about visiting Leanne, so he decides he's going to. On the way, he sees Rob being treated like a complete piece of garbage, just like Leanne mentioned earlier. He gets over to Leanne's room. There he talks to her about all the paintings she has done. Apparently she's like a painter. they are of like a floating island with a single tree. Glenn talks about how it was from like her previous life, and then they're getting along pretty well. Outside the room, Frederick is spying on them, and he is not pleased because no one can have my sister but me, right? Yes, that's right. Outside. Gwen then approaches. They discuss how Glenn didn't get any money. Like everyone got like money and all this other like material wealth from like bringing the princess back. Glenn's like, no, I just want to know more about the Grand Grimoire. And then Frederick wants him dead along with all the others. Later, when Leanne is not around, of course, not now. Elsewhere, Killian and Sienna are still drinking. They're arguing about katanas versus great swords. She uses a katana, uses a great sword. When Glenn crashes in, Victor is coming with his friend. Hooray! His friend is Cameron, the head scientist in all of Tarn. And Barthraz also shows up because they're friends. And Sienna gets mad. It's like, why didn't you help me since you were coming here anyway? And he's like, because you didn't pay, you dumb bitch. I thought we had this conversation. Women, am I right, fellas? Cameron then starts talking about the Grand Grimoire. He starts by stating the grimoires are formed in the earth in the areas with lots of ether, but usually they're very, very, very small. The Grand Grimoire is much larger, so it seems it was created by someone else. They also talk about the... what did they talk about? I've heard like some crazy word that doesn't make any sense. They talked about something, and now humans almost were destroyed in the 5th epoch by the Grand Grimoire, but they had survived, and now it's like the 7th, as the gods never used it. They talk about Gawain and how him and Victor used to study at Nysa and stuff, and how he found the stone in the treasury and discovered its power there. And that Victor thinks Gawain wants to use it for war. In fact, everyone does, aside from Cameron, who just wants to study it because science! To activate the Grand Grimoire, he explains that you have to smash it. And in a 3-meter radius directly around the Grimoire, so 9 feet for those in non-crazy places, everyone is fine. So it saves like everything within 9 meters, or 3 meters, and then everything else is like completely destroyed. And that's how Glenn and Killian survive. So that makes a lot of sense. And then after smashing it, it blows up, kills everything, and then it absorbs all the ether of all the dead things in the area, and that allows it to like reform and store even more power. And then they talk about how there was a note about the Grimoire being brought by a monk 50 years ago. The monk is now Kibber. In this monastery to like the east. So Cameron wants to team up to help us all get over there and find out a way to destroy the Grimoire because he doesn't like it either. There is some sketchy person watching us from the windows, and then Sienna notices as they leave. Glenn is like psyched up to join with Sienna and Killian want to go as well. So then, all right, cool. So we got Victor, Cameron, Killian, Sienna and Glenn, who are all going to head over to this monk's place to find out more about the Grand Grimoire, so they can figure out a way to destroy it and like end wars, or so that Glenn can like get some peace in his life from like all the damage and destruction he feels like he was directly responsible for, which is kind of some PTSD bullshit. Like he's not responsible for just doing his job and then bad things happening, but you know that's how it works. Right then, some guards come in to arrest everybody for being spies, and so that means it's time to fight. So we beat the shit out of them. And then we fight our way through town, so we run into some more battles or whatever, and finally we reach a dead end. And then Barthraz offers to stay so the rest of the crew can leave and he will protect. And that's when Leanne and Rob show up. She orders the guards to leave, and they mention a general, but was order them to give those things, and she's like, does the general outrank me? I'm the fucking princess. And they're like, I guess that's a good point. So then they all leave. She then tells Cameron and Victor that they may leave, but must take Rob and her with them. So they all team up again. Yay, we get the whole crew back together to head north to the monastery. And now Cameron's not an active character. He's just like a fun side character that hangs out with us. And then finally, we get a chance to join the Adventurers Guild. And as mentioned before at the very beginning, the Adventurers Guild is a place we can go once we join that, where there's guys just like out and about in each of like the biomes, and they'll be like, this is how you get to these monsters. And they give you like very vague hints that I still used to guide, to be completely honest, for some of them, because I was like, the fuck does that mean? Some of them are, you could figure it out. And then when you go back, you get like presents, and you can also buy certain things from the Adventurers Guild. So it's like another way to like get goodies and do more side quests and stuff if you love this game that much. So I didn't that much. So I went there once, and that was like the end of that. Let's see. Okay, so we leave, and then at that point we switch back over to Prince Frederick. He learns that Leanne fled with Victor and sends one of his generals after them. And he's like, make sure you kill the party and bring her back. He then talks to Gawain about the grimoire some more, the power, how to give it power. He then leaves. And then this chick June shows up. She is Gawain's lover, and so they talk about Glenn and how his echo is awakening, and that Victor will have to take care of him. They switch back over to Glenn. We switch back over to Glenn and crew, and Glenn questions the swamp that they're all in. And the name of the place is like Flower Field, but I guess it's swamp. And that this is what happened after this is like the place where the Grand Grimoire blew up, and because of the strong explosion of like ether and absorption and everything else, it like used to be a beautiful flower field, but because of the destruction and everything, it turned into a swamp. So that directly caused like all this crazy mutation and whatnot. As we wander around this like newly formed swamp, we find this huge barrier that blocks our path. Victor states that because there's a barrier, there must be some sort of wizard around here, so we just gotta go take care of that business, and then we'll be okay. So next we run into this camp that has been like completely, this like research looking camp that has been completely abandoned, and it looks like monsters really like turned it the fuck up. A bit further in, we reach another dead end, but Thraz and Victor mention that something feels very wrong, and then this big lady with wings jumps out of the water, but Thraz, it like causes a lot of problems, and Thraz is like, oh no, it's an illusion, and then she disappears. Victor mentions like, after she left the Ether weekend, so let's go check the barrier again. So we mosey on back over to the barrier, and then Glenn starts feeling bad again as we pass through the barrier and we wander around some more and do some stuff, and then the angel lady shows up again. Oh no, and we find out it's like a siren because she pops like all the way out of the water and there's a monster, so we kill it. A bit further we find a safe place to rest. Cameron starts talking about feeling something like wine, I need wine, and then Killian asks Victor about some secret bullshit. He says that he has a bunch of secrets, but he's not allowed to tell anybody because they're not his secrets to keep. And then Rob calls Glenn out for having secrets as well. And Leanne tells Glenn, go ahead and share everything. So he tells everybody the story from Windshire, and then Rob like flips the fuck out. And then Leon's like, chill it, bro. He already told me. It's fine. Then talk turns to the monastery. There's a water passage because air travel is impossible at this juncture, so we will have to go underground. I mean, it's like on an island, right? So meanwhile, we switch back over to Frederick. He asks Godfrey how he likes his new power. And we find out he got this new power from the Grand Grimoire. So apparently the Grand Grimoire can like blow up, but because it stores a lot of ether, it can also like bestow gifts upon users, I guess. Godfrey's loving it because he's an asshole and he loves having too much power. We then get interrupted, or those two then get interrupted by General Kenrick. Some guy named Prince de Lorey has taken the capital. So if you remember all the way back in the game, there was we learned that there was a civil war in Brilia, and that's part of the reason this like kingdom to the east, this continent to the east, hasn't done anything with Volandis, even though they've been at war too, because they've both been at war. But now that they're not at war anymore, the first thing they're probably going to do is like mosey on over here and like conquer the land because they're much bigger and stronger and whatnot. And then something we learned later on in the game is that Volandis is like very technologically like backwards because they've been at war for so long, which is not really how that works. But in this world, I guess that is how it works. So these other countries have had time to like build up their forces and have technological innovation and develop resources and stuff, while here people are too busy like slaughtering each other constantly for 150 years, which again, how do you have a war for 150 years? It's not like we do 10 battles here and then we just have like peace for like a whole season so people can grow food and then like fight a few more battles like the 100 Years War, right? It's just kind of like nonsensical. Anyway, and so this situation is like a dire existential threat to like the existence of Volandis. So Frederick then commands Gawain to take Godfrey and gives him like some instructions about what to do next. So the plan is to have Godfrey fly the Grand Grimoire over into the enemy group and then cut it so it like blows the shit out of everybody. And then he's super scared, but then Gawain is able to like use his charming elf magic to get him on board with the whole situation. This underground tunnel that's going to take us over to the monastery is called the Leviathan Trench, and it's full of genies. Fun. So all these genies have like weaknesses to specific magics. I mean, a lot of guys do. It's they kind of look it though. So we kill our way around here. At the very end, Cameron, who is or Cameron, who is itching for a nice drink of gin, finds a giant bottle of gin, but ruh-roh, it ends up being a dudgeon. Ha ha! Get it? After we beat him and his little homies up, God, I forgot their names already. The little gang of thieves, they show up, and they don't just want Sandy anymore. They want all of us because apparently we're all under like that. We all have like a ransom on our head from the Terran government. So we have to run away from them. And then we find this like little secure area to get into the monastery, and it's secured by the sand table or something. And so there has to be a glyph passenger on it. And then Victor, who is like, oh, it's like a nice Nisa glyph. I remember this, and he does it, and it's like wrong. And he does it again, and it's like wrong. And then the gang starts like bashing their way into the door. And so Killian's like, Glenn knows it, and everyone's like, how? But then he does. And it's funny because Glenn's like, yeah, I might know it. And he like walks up and does it immediately. And everyone like rushes inside. And then Killian dismisses any questions about Glenn or how he might know anything or whatever. And the team walks off except for Leanne and Glenn. She questions him about learning the glyphs. And he states, I never learned any. I never even learned how to read in Golgotha. But... and then they get interrupted, and so they can't continue that thought process, and they move forward. We wander around the monastery, and eventually we get to this library, but it is like a hot mess. So everyone decides they're going to split up and look for anything. Like we're looking for the diary of like the Nikilba or whatever, and then any information on the Grand Grimoire. And so Victor and Cameron, they use like a catalog to start looking around for it, about anything else. And then elsewhere, while everyone's kind of looking and doing their own thing, Frederick is getting ready for the maiden flight of his new flying fortress. It goes well, and so they head off to battle. They talk briefly about using the Grand Grimoire, and then we head over back to the monastery. Rob is complaining as usual because he's terrible. Don't worry, he gets better. But the point he gets better, by the time he gets better, a little more humble, I'm totally over this guy. And he's not good at fighting either, so he's kind of the worst character in the game, to be honest. I guess maybe if you're playing a harder difficulty and you really want to like slap down some of that poison and toxic goodness, then like he'd be better, but I'm not, so I don't like him. Meanwhile, sorry. So let's see. Victor and Cameron, so everyone's like talking about how no one really found anything that was relevant to anything that's going on. But then Victor and Cameron, who use like the catalog, which it's a library, I don't know why you just use that in the first place, they found some notes about a large grimoire that was given to the King of Tarn for payment to travel freely and to build churches in his land. It also talks about Lady Rania, the mother of the church, about the Inquisitors were talking about before. And then Barthraz comes out. He found the diary of the treasurer. He mentions that there was a rainbow grimoire that fell down the stairs and set off like an explosion. He then absorbed it, sucking up all the ether from like the dead birds that it killed to like reform itself. Before we can discuss anything more, the gang shows up. Time to fight. They are complete bitches. Like we could have easily taken these guys down earlier. They go down so fucking fast and so fucking hard. And then General Gaston shows up with some more troops. And the princess and Gaston go back and forth about the black sky armor. Oh, about like who did what and who was right. Sorry, I'm like reading off my notes, so sometimes I didn't make them super great. Anyway, so they go back and forth about like what's going on, about right and wrong and all that stuff. And then the black sky armor shows up, or this black sky armor shows up, and Victor's like, oh, I see they finally joined the scene. And everyone's like, Nani? And then the black sky armor calls Leanne the mother. Gusten's men start firing on the armor, and it blocks their attacks. And it's like, all right, everybody, let's vamoose. So we all run out of there. We're back to the trench, and we run back to the swamp, and then we get surrounded by guards. And then Gustan is there to make a deal. He says, Leon comes, and the rest can go free. And she's like, I'll take that deal. And he's going to take her up to the flying fortress, which is called Aurora. Nearby, the black armor watches. Up on Aurora, Leanne joins Frederick. They have a little like slap fight. Then banter about who's the bigger asshole. Like, is she a bigger asshole because she left? Is Frederick a bigger asshole because he started war? All that stuff. And I'm not going to lie, the prince makes some good points about her abandoning him to take full responsibility and how she's irresponsible and how she could have easily, like, she was older, so she easily would have taken over and none of this would have happened. So she's mad at him for doing the best that he can with, like, his skill and ability. I mean, he's still an asshole. But then he sends her down to the prison cell. Apparently, Gustan didn't just take her, of course. He took everybody because Frederick's a liar. So the rest of the team is about to get executed when they are saved by Cameron. He mentions that there's a hangar where they can get an airship and some sky armor, and that we can steal the grimoire that's here. Also, Rob begs us to rescue the princess, so of course we do. So we head over there, rescue Princess Leanne, and she's finally figured out that her brother is irredeemable and decides that she's going to join back up with us, and we're going to like have to be enemies, or they're going to have to be enemies. We work our way through the airship, get to the harbor. First, we find the sky armor for Glenn, and then we find a couple of the airships. At that point, Killian grabs Leanne, and apparently he was working for Nebralia the whole time. What? That is how he's been financing Glenn and his search. Like, his family didn't have that much money. He tells Glenn to come on, and they're going to use Leanne, and they can use her to, like, decrease the bloodshed slightly. And Glenn is like, what are you talking about? And then Killian talks about how they've killed so many people, including on this airship. And I was like, wow, the game, like, called you out. Because Glenn and people are like, no, we don't want bloodshed. We want to end war. And then Killian's like, motherfucker, we've been killing dudes like all day. We've like that grimoire, the Grand Grimoire probably didn't kill as many people as you've killed in this game. Just like wander around killing fucking dudes. And I was like, facts. So that was fun. Anyway, Leanne breaks free and we take off with Killian, and that is the end of Killian being in the party ever again, which is a bold move and I love it. We then get a tutorial about sky armor, which is, I mentioned it before in the very beginning. And so we guide Glenn out of the airship. At that point, we switch back over to Frederick. He gets word that our crew has stolen an airship, and he's about to blast the airship, but Leanne is on board, so he's like, whatever, just ignore it. Our guys on the airship spot Godfrey, who is using an inhuman power to charge up his sky armor. Then he does a blast. But Thraz and Victor call Glenn and tell him to attack the purple armor that Godfrey has. After beating some sky armors on the way over there, we get attacked by Valkyrie. Valkyrie are they're anti-sky armor warriors they're dragoons. They're fucking dragoons. So they're dragoons, they're all women, that's why they're Valkyries, I guess. And we find out that Leanne is actually the head of the Valkyrie before she abandoned post, right? So she leaps up and she fights the Valkyrie off so that Glenn can continue to get to Godfrey. And Godfrey's having kind of a little bit of a panic attack with his mission. He thinks he's going to die and stuff. So Glenn fights him and beats him up, and he takes Grand Grimoire. And then a voice tells him he's a fool. And Glenn starts to take fire from Tarn. And the Grimoire gets hit, so it falls to the ground and explodes. Then we go to Frederick, who is pissed off about Leanne, about all the stuff she's doing. We then skip over to Raphael and Ava, who talk about how the Grand Grimoire is a weapon made by the gods. Then we skip over to Gwaine and June. Gwaine is looking into the purple sky, and it's filled with all these eyes that are looking, and he mentions that it's the gods looking about who's using their weapon. And then he mentions that the gods really, really want this. They don't really want the stone. They just want to get the thief who stole the stone, which is Gwaine. They want revenge on him, because they're petty. They're petty gods. They're not actually there to help people, and we get a lot more information about that, because of course it's JRPG. Of course we fight God. Don't worry about it. Anyway, and then June asks him if he's afraid, and he's like, I can't be afraid. I have a task that I got to do. And if I have to kill God, I can't be afraid. It seems like June is blind in this game. I don't know if it ever specifically said, but at times I'm like, is she blind? Anyway, back to the team. Sienna says some cryptic bullshit about failing while the world around her collapses or something. And then Glenn is having a real piss fit. And so Victor goes to try to comfort him. We then get one of these summary of events after supposed chapter. That doesn't say chapter 2, but it's it's a chapter break where we get a history event. We find out that Tarn destroys Ascania's fleet completely. The explosion did have an effect, even if Terran lost it, because the Ascarians and everyone else on Volandis was holy shit, we're done. So he essentially united the whole continent, so success. 2 days later, after attaining full dominance for the kingdom, his father died, and so Frederick took the crown. And so this expands our world at this point. So then the kingdoms of Nobrelia and Amsterdam both want Volandis. And as I mentioned before, Nobrelia was held up in civil war, so that's the only reason they didn't come. And then the Amberic has a pacifist king, and he just wants to chill in his mountains like a fucking dwarf. So they don't have to worry about them. But Nobrelia is going to come because now the civil war has ended. And again, we get a lot of this. And I'm not telling you this like the game's telling you this. I'm telling you this because the game's talking about it. It's a reminder, hey, if you forgot or you weren't paying attention to the conversations that were being had earlier, we're going to lay it out for you because it's very important for the next portion of the game. So with the new war on the horizon with Nobrelia, the king taxes everybody, starts drafting people in the army, and then we pick up at this religious palace with this girl who's named H03, and we take control of her. We find out that this is some sort of training and development center, and there's a lot of talk about a flying island with a lot of the paintings all over it and stuff, and that we see paintings of the floating island. And then there's a lot of talk. Oh, let's see. And we find out this place is called Shambhala, and it's designed to last 1,000 years. We then get a man who introduces himself as Timothy, and he's a teacher here. And then he asks H03 what her name is, and she's like, H03, and he's like, no, what's your real name? And she's like, Leanne. What? This clearly took place in the past, right? It's we're talking about echoes, right? That's the name of the game, don't forget. We're talking about echoes and how people's ether can be reutilized, or people can have whatever. And immediately, we wake up in the present and we're in control. We're with Leanne, and she's like, oh, it's a fucking dream again. Maybe it's an echo, and it's spot on. Then Sienna and Rob come down to talk to her. They talk about how Glenn has had enough time to think, and then we head over, because it's been 3 months, and then we head over to Glenn, and he's talking to some orphan about buying food for the orphanage, and he's now operating, just like in Final Fantasy VI with Terra after the world's destroyed. So we finally get control again. We get to move around with Glenn. We go pick up some food. We learn from the merchants that he does this a lot. He's been living in this town for 3 months. There's like an abandoned mansion that he's taking care of with like orphans and stuff. And then we find out this place is Philandris, which is a trading hub under Lord Gustav's domain. And Gustav, if you have forgotten, which I had, was is Rob's dad. So this is like Rob's domain, essentially. Anyway, on the way back to the mansion, Glenn thinks back to when he first arrived. We get a little like flashback and how he was like ready to just die, and then as he was like in the manor just like willing to die without food or anything, all these orphans showed up and they got him to, you know, change his mind. So he heads back, and so we go back to the orphanage. There's like kids playing outside and whatnot. He heads up to his room, and then the voice calls out to him and calls him out for being like a bitch and stuff. And then Glenn calls out to the voice and about not revealing who he is, and then he takes a little nap. The next day, Victor shows up, and he finally is able to convince Glenn that they all share a burden, that it's not just him who caused these problems, like they all are a part of this, and they all were redeemed together, and that their mission isn't over because they still have to deal with it. And finally, Glenn agrees, but he needs a moment. He then talks to the orphans and says he needs to let go, because dun dun dun, they're just a hallucination in his head. What? He created them mentally, and he felt like he had to serve them to pay for all the guilt he was carrying, and they like treat him like shit because they aren't real, but they're in his head, and he's got a lot of guilt, like PTSD. He's like manifesting like things. Anyway, after dismissing them, the voice congratulates him, and he heads out. Outside, Victor is talking to one of the illusions, like one of the orphan illusions, which causes Glenn like a lot of confusion. We then see these fucking Skyrimers, and Glenn nerds out about how fucking awesome they are. Sienna and Ba Thraz pop out, and we learn that Sienna found Victor with her airship and wanted to help. Like, they all split apart, apparently, but then Sienna got Haku and her airship and then came back. And Ba Thraz still owes Victor due to some contract that they had, so we can all get together. And so your Skyrimer pilots for the rest of the game, period, to the very end of the game, are Victor, Glenn, Ba Thraz, and Sienna. So cool. No one else can be Skyarmor pilots, which doesn't really matter because you don't level them up. You level up like the Skyarmors that they're in. I mean, you technically level them up because you can equip them with different Skyarmors, have different abilities and whatnot. But it has no reflection upon their ability to like function as like regular characters when you're playing them as a normal size. So then we head to the west. We need to visit New Wineshire to get help, and this is where you get the fat black queen that I mentioned earlier. Anyway, we get another tutorial about Skyarmor, about leveling it up, about using the whole squad. We kill some trolls or whatever they're called, and then we run into Leanne and Rob. They left the airship because some condors showed up, and so Leon rushes towards Glenn and to give him like a hug, and they tell him pretty much the same thing Victor did, that they all carry the burden, yada yada yada. Glenn reflects on how he feels like he belongs again with this crew. We then find Haku at the top of this mountain trying to hold back this fucking great condor. We save him, drive the condor off, and then introductions are made. Glenn and Rob both insult the airship before we take off. Elsewhere, Gustan is speaking to Frederick about suppressing riots. He then suggests that maybe they should lay back on the taxes and conscripts, and then Gwen agrees, but Frederick has kind of lost it seems. Gwen mentions that they should just use the grimoire against the Nebrelians or whatever. They don't have to like do all this tax and bullshit. Since they went and recovered it. And Frederick is like, no, I don't want to use grimoire, which Gwen gets like pretty upset about. Back to Glenn and company, we meet Bran, that's the queen I was telling you about, and also this guy Sander, who is helping with the reconstruction. He's actually a spy sent from Tarn over here to Wineshire, because again, Tarn like runs everything now. They run the whole show. So also reconstruction. Okay, he then gets summoned by like Bishop Zacharias, the guy from like the very beginning, to go talk to him about something or whatever. And once he's gone, Bran speaks more openly. She is very sympathetic to our cause, trying to capture the Grimoire and end war and whatnot, and destroying the Grimoire for good. But her army is like 50 men and 3 airships. So there's not much she could do. Victor doesn't want men, doesn't want arms or anything. He just wants her to like give them a banner to fly under and then some land they can use to build like a base, and that will take care of our own forces and whatnot, which is like sweet because then we get to do a little base building. It's not as fun as like other games like Breath of Fire 2, which is still one of my favorite base building games of all time. That's like an RPG. I didn't really like the Suikoden one either. It's like you just collect people and then you can do side quests for them. I felt like in Breath of Fire you actually had to go and like search things out and you could like change your town and stuff. There was one of the Dragon Quest games that I felt like did a pretty good job of it as well. I want to say 6. I don't exactly remember. Anyway, And then Leanne steps forward and reveals that she's like Princess Celestia to get like extra aid. And then Victor mentions that Amalia already wants to join their forces as well, which gives Queen Bran like more incentive to want to help us. And let's see. So this gets Bran to finally concede. She gives us this place called Hermit's Isle, which is like this former pirate stronghold that's like off in its own little island or whatnot. As the crew is they go and check it out. It's like the cavern they occupy is like a piece of shit, and they're walking around, like, it'll do. We'll just kind of spice it up a little bit, get some help and whatnot. And then Victor mentions that he has registered us as an adventurers clan. So there's the Adventurers Guild, not to get confused with the Adventurers Guild. An adventurers clan is like a mercenary troop, and having that and that designation helps you like gather people because it's like some legitimacy, and then like you can have a little bit more movement in contracts with certain organizations like kingdoms and whatnot. Anyway, we call ourselves the Crimson Wings. Cool. So now we can fly anywhere in Volandis, and Glenn gets officially declared as like the leader of the group. And so the first step we need to do is get Amalia and bring her back, and that there's a contact we have in Basil that will help us find her. Before we leave, Glenn wants to speak to Victor, and then Glenn's like, why are you making me the leader? And then Victor has been pretty sly about Glenn, but Glenn is starting to pick up that there's a lot of actions and a lot of like interest in Glenn from Victor that like there's no explanation for. Glenn also points out that there's an amulet that Victor wears that glows whenever Glenn is near, and Victor's like, tee-hee, I can't tell you about it, oaths and all. And Glenn's like, okay, I guess that's okay. At this point, we don't go find Amalia. In fact, we explore this island. There's like a fortune teller around here, and then she's going to help us like find new clan members. I used a guide, so I don't need her ass. Plus, she charges money, and you really don't have that much money in this game. So then I'm like, all right, well, first things first, guide. Let's do some side quests. Let's pick up some extra bullshit, complete some more of this like board thing we got, and let's build this thing, right? So we head out and we just like pick up people, like a bunch of random people. Some of them give you like bonuses to combat. Some of them like you just have to gather because you have to get as you get your clan level higher, you get like access to more people, which give you like more abilities during combat and whatnot, and also give you like access to like merchant shop and just kind of like a bunch of other random shit. Like there's like a fisherman guy that will just like give you random supplies, like random super rare supplies, like every hour of game time you play, which like, again, I put like 30 hours into this. So if you get this guy now, that's like at least 15 like rare items, which is pretty good. And then we meet some optional party members. First one, well, I think we just meet one optional party member here. Let me check my notes. Yep, just one so far. This is Tomake. He has like a whole subplot where we go to like this place called Hooge and this archipelago or whatever. And he's a goat man, which means he's a blue mage. Awesome. Fuck yeah. So like Strago, or no, he's more like what's her fuck or what's his fuck or gender ambiguity or whatever. I think it's supposed to be a woman from Final Fantasy IX. What is her goddamn name with the frogs and stuff? Because she eats. When she eats, she gets abilities. So Tomake, when he eats, he gets abilities. So you can also compare him to like Strago from Final Fantasy VI, but Strago just like has to exist and get attacked. He just has to like hit by the magic, and then he learns it, right? So it's a slightly different capability. But he also loves frogs, so it's definitely a throwback, or it's like a homage to God, what was its name? Like the frog guy from Final Fantasy IX. Anyway, that's what it's like. So we pick him up. He's also missing his memories, so the more he eats, the more memories he gets back. And I thought that was going to go somewhere, and it never did. But you just like you get another side quest later for like another sub character, and that kind of unwraps his memories. But he still mentions like every time he gets like a new ability that like he remembered some more. So that's cute, I guess. So we did a lot of that putzing around the world. Let me see if there's anything else that really goes. Okay, no. So then we head to Basil to meet up with Princess Amalia. The place is all blown the fuck up. Heinlein shows up. Hey, you remember Heinlein? He was the guy who was helping Victor out like way back in the day. He's the Chancellor of Farnsport. He tells us that Frederick made an example of Basil as they like did not have enough food, or he didn't have the resources they wanted, and so the king like blasted him. And Leanne is super dismayed by this news. Heinlein then informs him that we need to meet up with the contact. So he's the contact to meet up with the contact in Farnsport. And that contact is Ferris. So we head over there, we meet up with Ferris. Ferris is like the head of the guard for Farnsport or Asconia before it got kind of destroyed or taken over. And he's very unimpressed with Glenn as the leader. And then some Tarn soldiers attack, and we kill the shit out of them. And kill the shit out of him so hard that it convinces Farron to join us. He then tells us the princess is outside Arcanet, the Archipelago, where we started with the Tomake quest, in a prison. So we had there next. The soldiers we got from Farnsport. So the plan is we're going to send the soldiers we got from Farnsport that were under Ferris's command to distract the Tarn forces, and then we're going to sneak in the back and get Amalia. So the guards interrupt us, and so we beat them up, and then we go and find Amelia, and then we fight more guards. You just fight a whole bunch of guards. And then Amelia refuses to go without her people, especially without all the other guards or soldiers that got captured. So we get a little background about her. She's apparently the sole survivor of some secession dispute, and that she has the curse of healing. She's also shy, and I love her. As I mentioned multiple times, she is the best. So we eventually get through this place and find the rest of like these soldiers so we can nope out of there. At some point, Victor and Bathraz talk about the pact and the curse and everything. A bit later, everybody like leaves. And then Bathraz and Victor talk about how their guards kept like showing up where we were at, and they kept like seeming to know what we were doing or whatnot. And so there's got to be a traitor in our midst. And it turns out that it was the most obvious choice possible. It's Heinlein, the one who's been leading us this whole time. So we learn this as General Matthew rolls up, and we have a battle. We have to in like this battle mech thing, and he's super pissed about Celestia and how essentially she's the reason he's like a gimp now. So we beat the shit out of him, and he threatens to self-destruct, taking us all out as well. And then he does, but we also survived the explosion. Let's see. Then a masked man. Oh, no. Okay. So he threatens to self-destruct. Let's see. Okay, so we survived the explosion. Matthew. Okay, what did I write here? Anyway, so right before he's about to do the self-destruct thing, the whole world goes like black, like sepia or whatever. It goes trans. I wrote it goes trans because the whole screen turns like pink and blue. And then a masked man shows up and he's like, ooh, hoo, hoo, and he's like dancing around. And Bathraz is like, fuck us. And apparently he's the guy who hands out the curses for the magic. So he'll give power if you sacrifice something to him. So Bathraz had his limbs severed and whatnot. He then makes some comment about how the bigger the sacrifice, the better the gift. And he's like, right, Amelia? And she's like, ooh. And I don't know what Matthew decided he was going to give up because we don't hear it, but he looks ridiculous afterwards. He also goes down super easily. We talk about the pact. Amalia tells Glenn to stay in his lane when he asks about the curse and whatnot. And it's like, all right. So then we head back to Wineshire. We talk to Queen Brand some more about getting the grimoire and then destroying it and stopping Frederick and whatnot. Back over at the Isle, Amalia's having like her vast princess like crap. Like she has like attendants like rolling in with bag after bag after bag or luggage after luggage to move everything in. And then Glenn's like watching, and she calls Glenn out for checking her out since she's only 14. And I was like, high five, she's the best. I love this game. We get word that someone wants to meet up with Glenn alone in Dune Wineshire, so he gets ready to go take care of that. But before we go do that, of course, we're going to stumble into like some more side quests. There's this lady on the shore of Hermit's Isle, and then she wants us to go and kill the Seven Kings. So first we got to go to Organ Grotto. She helps us get past this one bad guy. Like there's this bad guy that will just like decimate us, and we can't use sky armor, which would be the only way to beat him. But she has some item that when you use it, it just kills him. And I was like, damn. Anyway, we find the pathway through. There's like a whole bunch of doors. Well, it had doors because as we're going, so there's like, you have to get past all these doors. You just have to wander around and like hit switches and stuff. So we do that. And then we go down this elevator, and it's taking us to the depths of the lost city of Nysa. So it's like a sneaky path to get down there, so we don't have to deal with like the wyverns and everything. While we're taking the elevator down, the team talks about the True Kings, and I mentioned this before. This is where we get some like information about the True Kings and how they're like more important. And she talks about in her homeland. In her home world, there were these caves that no one could enter because the wind was like way too strong. And then after 100 years, there was like an earthquake or something. And they came to find out that it's actually this Arbo, the meditating monk, and that he was the first true king. He's a giant ape. The second true king is this boar that just travels in a straight line, creating vast trenches. The third is Snadel, the dragon, who's the undying dreamer who lives here in Nysa. The fourth is the mysterious voice that speaks like once a century, and it sounds like a parrot. They call it the divine voice. The fifth is the second moon, which is an owl, Luna, the watching eye. And apparently, if airships get too close to the moon, it like takes care of them real quick. The sixth lies in the ocean. It's the Kraken Wylord of the Abyss. And the last is this rat swarm, Karmacians, the Black Plague. With all that like fun explanation out of the way, we reach the bottom. There's a gate with like a math puzzle, and since math is hard, we leave Magnolia here. No, her name's not Magnolia. Madeline? I think her name's Madeline. We leave our friend here to figure out, and that finishes like the side quest. And I say side quest, but like you have to do this as part of the main quest. So don't think this is just going to be some old side quest. At that point, now we head over to Tarn, where we find an announcement for anyone who sees the white door to become the fire support. And so Glenn is like, hey, I see white doors, let's go. So we go, and now we meet Magnolia, who's my second favorite character. That she doesn't join you now, but she joins you much later. She believes Glenn actually sees the door, and then takes him to the back and to see like this guy, like the shell of a human, and they explain shells. So she talks about how like the ether is being stretched thin because people are having more kids or whatever. There's like more people, and how some people are just born and they don't have like any soul because there's no ether for them or whatever. And this is like the explanation about why magic is going away. Anyway, she introduces us to this guy who's like in a coma, and she wants to heal him. But to do that, she has to use the power of the door to like enter his mind or whatever. Let's see. I talked about all that. Okay. So we're gonna use the door to and then heal him, and then we're gonna be able to bring everyone with us. So with her abilities and Glenn's ability to see the door, we open it up and we go inside. So let's see. So we go through this and we solve these like fun puzzles where we pick up like pieces of rooms and move them to other areas so we can like get through this like dungeon area. And eventually we see like all the trauma about something about like him beating his daughter or giving his daughter some poison because she was sick or something. And then we finally get to like the very end, and Magnolia heals it, which cures him to death. She then talks about helping others. Then she takes Glenn back to the white door. The door is in a connection between the maelstrom and the living world, and she explains that nothing about like that. She just kind of like says a bunch of cryptic shit, and then we leave. It's like, all right. Anyway, after all that fun times, if you may have forgotten, but it's time to go meet our friend who asked to meet us privately. Meet Glenn by himself in New Wineshire. So we went over there. Our whole crew is like standing around watching Zacharias speaking to the people. Raphael, the Inquisitor's with him. And Glenn is supposed to meet the guy at the church. So he heads off to the church alone, and he finds it's Killian. Apparently now he has a new job. His like third job of the game was like Iron Bull mercenary, working for Nebralia, and now he works for the church. He's an inquisitor, apparently. He mentions that when we were in the monastery, he found a book that described Nakilber, the monk guy, and he wrote about the grimoire. It described him exactly. Who's him? Gawain. So Gawain is apparently Nakilber, right? And so after like our little spat, he went back to the monastery and found that the monks were looking, or that the church was looking for the tomb of Renya. Oh, no. So, hold on. Exactly how good looks. Okay, so, looking for the tomb, and found this means Gawain. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that Gawain apparently knows the location of the tomb of Renya, which is what the church is looking for. He then gets summoned to the bishop, and there's some commentary about Zacharias, like, liking to fuck dudes, and how Killian is, like, filled that role now, even though I don't think he's gay, because he seems, like, not really that into it. But, because he has some commentary about, like Glenn is like, oh, I've heard Zacharias something, or like other people talk about it, and he's like, I have to go, the bishop needs me. And then Glenn's about to be like, what? And then Killian's like, I'll do anything to like get my cause, which is to like help the people and be at peace and whatnot, right? Like his whole thing about his sister getting raped by dock workers and it's the fault of the nobles, like that cause. So he'll do anything, including gay sex, apparently. Okay, cool. Sounds good. So then we head over to Bran because there's a quest marker there. And on the way, we see Tarn, the Tarn ambassador, hanging. And the reason why is because Nebralia is on the march. So it's time to act, she says. And she's made a deal with Nebralia. Tormund, her duck general, is super mad about it because he doesn't like the guy Jen, the foreigners. He'd rather be under the rule of Frederick than like the Nebralia. But Victor and Glenn are like, well, as long as we get to destroy the grimoire, then YOLO, we're going to go in. We then head back. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to dive in, try to get the grimoire while Frederick is distracted fighting Nebralia. And then Glenn actually gives like a pretty rousing speech on the airship while we're flying over. Meanwhile, Gawain is reporting to Frederick about his plan. Frederick is like, we're not using the grimoire, but he is using the grimoire because he charged up all his journals like superpowers. They get word about Lady Brand's betrayal, and Gawain goes to take care of that. So we end up attacking. We fight a bunch of guys, and then head out, and we turn off all the anti-air defense so we can move around. About halfway through the castle, we run into Gawain. We find out that he's the voice. He's the guy who keeps talking to us and like shows us the door and whatnot. And then him and Victor talk about Gawain wants to give us the grimoire, but that he has a duty to perform. So he will have to fight him and his lady friend June. And this is a story battle where we just, doesn't matter how much damage we do, it just goes on. It goes on for way too fucking long. They don't even attack. And eventually they're just like, oh, you're too strong. You have defeated us. There's nothing we can do. You must go forward. And the grimoire is over there. And so we rush forward, and then Glenn wants to talk to Gawain, but then Gawain's like, you can talk to me, whatever. Wink, wink. I'm the voice in your head. And Glenn's like, oh yeah, that's a good point. So we shut down the rest of the anti-air stuff so we can use our sky armor to like fly around and grab all the treasures. Like it's a lot of it's just like boost to sky armor to make him stronger. And then once we decide to move on, we head inside the castle and run into Cameron. Hey, he's excited as the generals are channeling their energy, so they're all super distracted. We then get Tormund the Duck general. He goes to kill Cameron because Guy Jen, he'd rather be under the rule, again, like I mentioned before, like the most obvious betrayal in the game. He is very concerned about foreigners being in charge, so Victor kills him. And then my future wife, when she becomes 18, of course, everybody, come on. Amalia goes to heal him. And then, who is this? I put ASCII. Oh, Cameron tells us that he's discovered a way to destroy the grimoire. So the way the grimoire works, I think I've said this before, but just as a reminder, when it has all the stored up ether, and then when you hit it, it breaks, and it causes this huge explosion that kills everything, and then everything that's around there that died gets reabsorbed inside the thing. And so somehow it when the more you kill with it, the more it charges, because it gathers up all the ether plus the new ether or something. So the more life it destroys, the stronger it gets. But that would mean the opposite is also true. So if you destroy it in an area where nothing dies and it's there is no ether, then it would just break apart because there's no more ether for it to absorb. At that point, he passes out. Amalia is he's healed, Farron, take him away. Then Glenn is what does he mean by the opposite? And I'm you are a dumb fucking ass. And so Bathras has to explain this very obvious thing. Leanne has some sort of revelation, but she doesn't tell us just yet about what it is. So we enter the castle, meet Maria, a Valkyrie chick. She's the new head of the Valkyrie now that Leanne abandoned post. We overhear her ordering guards around. They're ordered to kill us, and Leanne mentions that she's the captain. Sneaking past her, we find all the generals charging up. One of them, the Alana chick, uses her power. So the Brillians are attacking. Alania uses her power to freeze the ocean, which is baller shit. And so all the Navalia troops leave the ship because they're just getting hit by bows and arrows by the Tarn troops. And then Godfrey melts the ice, so both armies are now in it. And then Kenrick uses lightning power to shock the water, which kills everybody. And so they were defeated, all the forces of Navalia, including some forces of Tarn, without the use of Grimoire. So Frederick is right. They got the power. Oh, yeah. And again, it's they did get the power from the Grimoire, but I guess they didn't directly use it or something. Once at the stone, and by the way, we never get any explanation about this, being able to use it to get powers from the Grimoire. I assume it has something to do with concentrated ether or something, but I don't know why that wouldn't drain it, and you could just do that enough times, and then it would destroy itself, but I don't know. Who knows? I guess it's just mysterious magic bullshit. So once we get to the stone, we find Frederick with his bodyguards, these two knight boys who are pretty cool looking. Him and Leanne go back and forth about rulership and what's he doing, and he's, she doesn't understand and he doesn't understand how he didn't need to do any of this hardship stuff. Cameron choose the general, and how he just used the generals, and also how he used the Grimoire in Windshire to power it up, sacrificing his own people there as well. He says she's no longer a sister, and we fight the bodyguards. After the battle, we see Gawain cry out. He has read fate wrong. Leanne is in danger. He must warn Glenn. Back to Frederick and the team. He is mad. We are overtuned and beat the shit out of his bodyguards. So they argue a bit more. Gawain tells Glenn to open the door to save Leanne. He then sees the past Leanne. She is sick and dying. Then Rob, as a boy, watching. Oh, so okay. So then Gawain is Glenn, open the door. That's the only way you can save Leanne. And so then he opens the door, and then he starts seeing everybody in the past. So he sees Leanne in the past, and that she is sick and dying. Then we switch over to Rob, who's a boy watching his mother die of illness, and then we switch over to a bandit group killing all of Bathraz's people, and then we switch over to a man named Bartholomew and Nysa as it is sinking. Victor rushes in, and then we see the Inquisitor Ava speaking to Sienna, who dun 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 is also, she was an Inquisitor. What? More importantly, she has short hair, so that's hot. Sienna claims that the church is ruled by demons. Then my wife, Amalia, is in the ballroom with a bunch of she's in a dining room with a bunch of dead people that she probably poisoned to ascend the throne. And then we head back over to the present. So clearly, Glenn is seeing everybody's past because of whatever connection, ether in the maelstrom and the door and whatnot. Gawain orders Glenn to keep the door open so that he can get there. And then Maria, the Dragoon Valkyrie lady, shows up, and then she stabs Leanne. As she does, Bathraz says some cryptic shit about her not supposed to dying yet, or not supposed to dying here, and then the whole screen freezes, goes black and white. And then some of these this crazy force rises from the ocean. There's these three giant purple alien creature looking things that rise up all over the ocean to the top of this tower where we're fighting. And they are free as Leanne was holding them. as like the vessel or whatnot. And then they're like, uh-oh, we came too early. The plan has failed. The Harbinger is going to win. But if they sacrifice themselves, they can turn back time. But the same thing would just happen again. So I don't know if that's even the point. And now that she's the last maiden, like things are going to get real bad, and it's going to be the end of the world and whatnot. Glenn is actually not frozen. He's the only one, and he sees all this shit. And he can still move, in fact. And they recognize that, and they're like, hey, you can change fate, and you can save the world. Leanne has to survive. We're going to return to like a few moments ago, but this time Glenn... so then they return time back, and this time Glenn like saves Leanne, and then a sky armor comes down, and Victor is like, someone's like, oh, it's sky armor, and the Victor's like, actually, and he like pushes his glasses up on his nose. And he's like, that's actually a seraph armor. The sky armor designed after the seraph armor. And in my head, I'm like, shut up, nerd. Like, the fuck are you talking about? like, are you correct? Yes. Are you an asshole? Also correct. Oh, man. And then it's Gawain, and Gawain is like, I'm sorry I'm late. Oh, my bad. And then he comes out and tosses Bathraz, the grimoire, and then we all nope the fuck out of there. Maria is about to follow us to fight us some more because she's a bitch. And then Gawain compels her to stop, like compels her. Like it's not like, Maria, I command you to stop. He's like, you will stop. You're right, with like a command voice. And she's like, oh. Let's see, had to die, he was too slow. He then thinks about how the three guardians had to die and that he was too slow and it shouldn't have happened. He ponders if he's capable, if he has the capabilities to like change the world or do what he needs to do. We then pull back to a summary screen. The defeated Abralia goes like put fear of the fear of God in Valandris and Fedric and the kingdom of Tarn throughout like the whole world. In Valandris, celebrations were had for those loyal to the crown, but the common folk continued to cower and to mourn. Frederick then branded his sister a traitor and a bastard, not related to the king anymore. By like royal decree, he like cut off her like her like princess-ship or whatever, so that no one should recognize her as such. But this would cause him problems later because people would use her as like a guiding light for the resistance to him and to follow. And this brings a lot of people to Hermit's Isle to join. And then we switch over to the sermon that's going on. This guy is talking about the Harbinger and how they helped imprison it and how now it's like a force and how they have to find a weapon to like destroy it and whatnot. And this is like back in the past life of Leanne when she was like other Leanne. So we learn that she was engaged to this homie Van, who's kind of a drunk asshole. But she's made friends with Timothy, her like teacher. And so Van like stumbles in drunk and talks about them being engaged, and she's like, okay, gotta go. And so her and Timothy run off. We get like a puzzle room, and she's not supposed to take these trials for like another year, but then Timothy explains how we solve these puzzles, which is important because when we visit Shambhala later in the game, we have a lot of these puzzles. So it's cute that it like kind of introduces like easy puzzles now, and then we get there later, it's like, oh, I remember how to do this. Excellent. And that by solving all these puzzles, it takes us to like a huge treasure trove, which these two don't really get any treasure. They just kind of go through it. Also, they will open chambers where the Harbinger can be contacted or something. And so, so we do a little tutorial and go through that. We finish up with all these puzzles, and then Timothy and Leanne have this like hard conversation about how she's a maiden and how he's a teacher and they can't have a relationship. Except Timothy decides he's going to quit being a teacher so they can get married. And she's like, oh, Timothy, I love you so much. Of course, Vaughn is over and around listening to this conversation, and he looks pissed as much as like a pixelated guy can look. Anyway, back to the present. Glenn gets distracted, so he goes to talk to Victor about Gawain. Glenn tells him that Gawain has been speaking to his mind, and Glenn goes off for a minute about his past lives. And this is how Glenn knew about the rune thing, right? Because his echoes are pretty strong. And Bathraz is like, we should tell him. And so then they head over to Leanne, and Victor reveals that he knew Glenn in a previous life, and that Bathraz knew Leanne. They talk about the echoes, how they have pieces of the previous lives and all that fun stuff. And that they told somebody once about their previous lives and about the echoes that they knew about them, and that person ended up killing themselves, right? So that's why they're very cautious about revealing anything to Glenn and Leanne and stuff, and it's better if they just kind of like figure it out on their own, it seems. Victor then mentions that the 2 amulets that they've been carried around are tied to Glenn and Leanne's like life force or their ether or their echoes or whatever, so that's how they were able to find them, was that, and then Glenn, when Glenn was like, why does it always let up when I'm around? And it's because it's tied directly to him, and it's because it was meant to be, it was created to specifically find Glenn so that Victor could return. But why? He can't say right now. He's gonna have to figure it out later. And that this is the real reason that Bathraz and Victor came to Volandis. They then ask Leanne what she is seeing in the past. She talks about how her parents died, and then she joined this order called the Order of Lenore, and she mentioned Shambhala. And Bathraz is like, oh good, you remember, so we need to go there now. Because apparently he belongs to the Order of Lenore. And then we are like, well, now that we got the Grand Grimoire, shouldn't we focus on that and figure out what to do with that and whatnot? And then so everyone meets up as like the whole group. Sienna is pissed about like everything as normal, and she's especially pissed about choosing to go on like this personal mission for Leanne over destroying the Grimoire, taking care of that. And then Cameron says something about having to like wait to kind of like figure out exactly what's going on with the Grimoire anyway, so it's not like the end of the world. And then Sienna is like, Shambhala is dangerous without a guide. And Haku is like, perfect, Sienna knows how to get around there. So then she yells at him. Sienna finally gets like talked into helping out with this whole shebang. And Haku tells us that he knows where it is and he can fly us over there on the airship. And that it's northwest of Volandis. Elsewhere, Killian, after getting gay sex by the bishop, he reads a letter from his parents about how his sister has remained in the same conditions, and then he thinks more about that. So off to Shambhala we go. Once we get there, there's this owl thing that Leanne points out, and then we see this owl-like creature, or I found out later it's kind of like an eagle creature. It's like running away from us. Later on, he stops us. His name is Eagle. This land belongs to the church. He mentions that he is a Knight of the Dusk Blue, and then Rob immediately is like, Knight of the Dusk Blue, that's amazing. And everyone's like, the fuck is that? And apparently it's some grand knighthood in like all the world or something. And they're like the most virtuous group or something, whatever. So we fight this guy, and after his defeat, Rob wants to fangirl of some more, but Sienna puts a kibosh on that and orders this guy to take us to the elder of the Sova, which are like these bird people who live here. They have this sweet-ass like bird village. Eagle takes us to the chief, and he's like a big fat chocobo kind of style guy. Hold on, I'm switching lanes. Okay. He explains that the church saved them like many years ago, and that because of that, they all swore an oath that they would guard Shambhala from outsiders. And Sienna thinks about this, and then everyone kind of badmouths Eagle, but since Rob is a simp for the Blue Knights, he freaks out, storms off. And the chief is like, well, you guys can stay here for now since you're already here, and we'll decide what to do with you guys later. So we explore. We grab some chests. We learn more about the Sova and everything else. And then we kind of head over to Frederick. He is meeting with the bishop, Zacharias. Zacharias wants to open more churches. Frederick calls them out for undermining his authority, doing all this stuff. He then banishes the church from Volandis altogether. After Frederick talks to his generals, and Killian returns to interrupt him. And he's like, the fuck do you want? And then he's like, Killian's like, hey, just a heads up, the church expected that response. Because they need to find the grave of Lady Renya, because she's like the holy mother of the church and whatnot. So they're already like on their way. So they gave you this kind of like ultimatum, essentially, knowing that you would reject them, and then it gives them kind of like an excuse to like invade and do whatever the fuck they want, or something like that. And we find out that this church headquarters is on a floating island or something, and that they're going to be here in like 3 days. Killian also mentions that his own motivations for protecting Volandis, his whole like shebang with where he wants to protect Volandis and like kill off all the nobles or something. Anyway, Frederick sent some scouts to confirm what he said. Meanwhile, Zacharias and Randolph are speaking about the invasion, about the disappearance of Leanne and all that stuff, when Gawain approaches them. Raphael calls him Nalkelbur, but we already knew that. And then Gawain then compels them with his magic to forget about him and leave. Killian rushes up, and he stabs Gawain. Like he gets into like a little argument with Gawain, and Gawain can't like compel him to forget, and so then he stabs Gawain. Gawain falls over, but it does nothing. He just like teleports to a different spot. And then it seems Gawain naps up Killian. We then return to Glenn and company, and they're talking about what to do. When the chief comes down and is like, "You are free to continue your travels." They all talked, and since they failed already, there's no reason to be mean, and they love being friendly. So okay, that says Eagle along with us. This other guy, Mateo, as guides to get us to Shambhala. Sienna is skeptical of their change of heart, but like whatever. First things first, we have to shut down the anti-air so we can fly around the sky armor, of course, which is the thing you do in a lot of these places. So I don't think if I mentioned this, but the sky armor has like regular movement in battle, and then it can like fly. And when it flies, it can like, it doesn't like leave the map. It just can like travel over like obstacles. While when it's in its like walking phase, essentially it's like hovering, but it's like walking. So we think we like a tutorial. This game's like 3/4 of the way being over, and we finally get like a tutorial about like hate, which is threat meter, and about building hate, and about defense, and about tanking, which because Eagle's a tank, and he's like unofficially and officially joining the party at this point because he never leaves. We run around here a bit. We do some like cutting of chains to release like parts of the island. And then eventually we get to see Godfrey and some Terran soldiers. They've apparently followed us here. And, well, they're not followed us here. They came here to like see what the church is hiding and such. So, and every time we release like 2 or 3 islands. And then after releasing the next one, we switch over to Randolph and his men looking for Godfrey. So the church is tracking the Godfreys here or whatever. And then a soldier runs down to Randolph with some news about the Sova village. And it's like, oh no, what's going on? So what's the news? We don't know. Don't worry about it. Back to Glenn. Once we break up all the anti-air and we get closer to like this big tree, which is like the thing to go ahead, Rob is still fangirling about Eagle and about the Blue Knights and all that shit. When we find a bunch of monsters in cages, the Sova don't know anything except that they belong to the church. Sienna explains that the church creates the monsters and then distributes them. Amalia guesses that it's to create new converts, but Sienna's like, nope. So Amalia's whole idea is that, oh, I guess if they put monsters out there and then they come help people, that'll help. And Sienna's like, that's not the reason why. And she also kind of reveals the fact that she used to be an Inquisitor at this point. We enter the main building and fight some guards. Then we find that Mateo has like totally disappeared. And so something is definitely up with the Savo. At the back of this little area, we find this huge lump of flesh, and then Sienna freaks out and grabs the scientist, demanding that she's like, I demand answers right now. And he's like, oh, it's an ether battery. And then Raphael shows up, recognizes Sienna as an Inquisitor, of course, and before any further explanation, a bunch of explosives go off. And we find out it's Mateo, and he runs in, and he's like, no time, you guys are supposed to not be here. I told you to wait at the beginning front. We have to run now. And as we do, Godfrey gets in our way, as he is here, and he's gonna like blast us, but then Raphael like interjects and injures him, and then Godfrey like mutates because of like the power of the Grand Grimoire or whatever, and he knocks Raphael out. So then Sienna and Bathraz announce that this is the best time to kill this motherfucker, and so we fight. And then once he's dead, we all rush out. Mateo explains that the Savo realized that the church tricked them. They tricked them into the oath. Like they sent monsters to the village because they're the ones who create the fucking monsters, and so they made this oath, and so the oath is kind of false, but because the Savo are such honorable people, even though they made the oath under like false pretenses, they had to, they still have to like follow through with it, and since they betrayed the oath, they all have to seppuku themselves. Yep, that's what happened in the village. So he tells the Eagle to take care of himself, and that they're proud of him, and that because he left and he was part of like this other group for a while, the Blue Knights, when he came back, he's not like held under the same constraints, and he didn't break the oath or do any of that stuff, and they should follow his heart. And also that the path we're looking for Shambhala is on the North Island. So we head back to the village, and Eagle buries all his friends, and then Victor tells him what we are doing and how we're working on stuff, and this is where he like officially joins the party. And we also find out that Randolph survived, which is good. So we head over to like the pathway or the island or whatever that Matto told us about, and Bathraz is like, oh, this should work, and asks Leanne to touch it. It's like this teleportation looking thing. It lights up when she does, and it teleports us into this forest. Leanne mentions that she recognizes the place from her dreams. Bathraz warns Leanne about her echo and about the madness that could happen, and then Cress, who's Amalia's dog, starts barking because dun dun dun, Gawain is here. Him and Glenn go back and forth about trusting him, about this and that. Either way, Gawain is going to observe everything that's going on here. Like, we don't have to trust him, but he's still going to like go invisible mode. He's going to put like his shield cloak or whatever on, whatever you call it in Harry Potter, and follow us. He does some of his tricky like little magic, which Victor mentions he did not learn in Nysa. It tells us that we must pass a trial to get to the answers that we seek. We then get to do those puzzles that we had to like learn to practice with in Leon in the past. Only they're like way more complicated. I had to use like had to go to a little Neo Seeker for one of them. The rest of them are pretty easy. I don't know if they're pretty easy, but one of them was just like, what the fuck? After the second puzzle, we find some golems tending to field. So there's been a lot of like these golems that we had to fight in here, and then some of them were just like chillaxing. Gawain shows up to get sentimental about the golems being dedicated to their tasks even after all these years and whatnot. And then Sienna disagrees, as they never had a choice. They were programmed to be this way. But then we proceed. It's kind of like a short-lived like discussion on the matter, so it wasn't like too thought-provoking, to be completely honest. It was just like, Gwen's like, I have a lot of respect for these creatures that have chosen to do this thing. And she's like, they didn't choose that. They were programmed that way. And then it's just like, agree to disagree. And so I was like, why did this even come up? Anyway, at the end, we fight this big pig statue boss thingy. And as we're about to proceed further, Gwen tells us that his journey with us has come to an end here. And I'm like, you didn't do shit, bro. Like, what? As it's far too dangerous for him to continue. Glenn then calls him out. Well, like why the fuck was he even here? Which I've got to run on the same page, Glenn. And Gawain says he loves hanging out with us, and then he leaves. It's like, okay. Leanne has a moment, it's like remembering things and having a headache and whatnot, and then we proceed. We enter this very large room with several stone tablets about, and Leanne can read it, and then it talks about the true history, how evil rose up, the people of the North fought the Harbinger, and they couldn't beat it, but eventually they were able to seal it with the help of the Vane. The Vane are like a super magic race, and that they maintain the seal, but to retain the seal, the Vane had to travel to a different dimension where they became immortal. And then the rest of the followers of Lenora spent the next like thousands of years looking for a weapon that would ultimately destroy the Harbinger. And that part of this creation of the Echoes was the creation of the Echoes, so that like the specific echoes and like a way to have like the soul continue forward so that people could like continue to remember the stuff. Because they knew it would take like thousands of years for them to come up with a weapon, and so they could work and then get all the information to somebody, and then they could like get their echo to like resurrect, and then that person would like remember everything, and then they could spend like another 100 years or whatever working on it. Bathraz mentions that the current church was founded as a way to pass on this information as well, and Sienna's like super like aghast by all this. So Leanne is the Holy Mother reborn that the church is looking for, and we knew that from like all the way back at the beginning of the game. And we have to find a weapon that can destroy the Harbinger. Maybe we can use the Grand Grimoire. And then the whole place goes like super dark, and Amalia mentions a strong miasma, and then we're teleported to like a strange hill. These three beings approach Leanne calling her the Maiden. They mention they are the Vane. They talk about the Grand Grimoire, how it's merely a toy. It will not destroy the Harbinger. At that point, they sense something about Glenn smells, something about stealing the stone. Then the place changes, and we see the true forms of the Vane, and they're like these giant Eldritch, like Cthulhu-style beings, and they want to destroy Glenn. And then we're like back in the ruins, and we were saved by an unknown voice. The voice talks about who the Vane are and how the Vane have been driven mad by their like immortality, and the voice beckons us to come and see the truth. So we do some more puzzle stuff. Then we see a vision of mass destruction, and this mass destruction was not done by the Harbinger, but by the Vane. So the voice tells us that the Vane feared the humans. They feared that they were coming too strong, that they were weakening the cage on the Harbinger and all that stuff. So every now and then they'd come out and they just burn the shit down out of like humanity. And this has happened like numerous times over like thousands of years. And that the Grand Grimoire is like one of these weapons that they created to like purge humanity, so that to keep like the Harbinger in check, and so that the humans couldn't be a threat to the Vane either. And that things were fine and just going along, but then like Gawain stole the Grand Grimoire, and that like pissed them off to no end, because they feel like they're gods, and they've been like affronted, and like the affront is the most offensive thing at all, not the fact that humans have this weapon. They don't give a fuck about that weapon, but that Gawain actually had the balls to like steal it. And then Glenn for some reason has like the stench of Gawain on them as well, which we get more information about later. So we get some help with another puzzle. We find a huge treasure trove, but we don't find this voice. Then as we leave, the sky armor, like the black sky armor, all the way from back in the very beginning shows up, or back in the monastery shows up. It calls Leanne out for being like the resurrected mother, or the Echo, or the chained Echo. Get it? Anyway, they mention that the Harbinger is sleeping and does not yet pose a threat. And the Vane, on the other hand, they are a threat, and that we should use the Grand Grimoire to destroy the Vane. and that is why they are here, and they will be taking the Grand Grimoire now. Glenn is like, nah, so we fight. He mentions that his sky armor, Casper, is being pushed to its limit, and Vector mentions that Casper is the original Seraph armor. After defeating him, he concedes that we are stronger than he thought, and he will leave the Grimoire with us and allow us to destroy the vein. And end the cycle of destruction. And then he mentions that the key to the vein is in Lady Renya's tomb, and then it takes off. Liam believes that we should destroy the gods, something from her memories, and then Sienna's doubtful as usual, and Glenn gets hot, like, not hot and bothered, well, maybe hot and bothered, and then he passes out. Back in the past, we get to see the story of Leon in the past and Timothy. They smooch a little bit. And then we get back to the present. Glenn wakes up in Hermit's hideaway. He attends meetings with everybody. Cameron's back to being in good health, and they talk about whether to destroy the Grimoire or to wait. Farron advises that we should use it to kill the vein, because he's actually Gwaine pretending to be Farron. Oh, man. Because, Amalia's like, Farron. And then he comes walking in, and it's like, who are you? And it's like, all right, I'm Gwaine. You caught me. Leanna is very interested in this, in getting Gwaine's help. And then she shushes Glenn, as Gwaine has clearly been helping us this whole time, because Glenn is still kind of pissed off about being used, because Glenn is kind of a bitch in this game, not going to lie. Despite his use of the Grimoire in the past to use it to charge, so it has enough power to actually destroy the vein. Gwaine explains that Amalia knows the location of the tomb, as it's actually the same. It's like within the tomb of like her family, where her ancestors are located, and that Glenn has the ability to open it because he has the ability to like reach through the door or whatever. And so with their powers combined, they can get inside and we can get the key or whatever. And then everyone like talks about that for a little bit. Victor thinks about how Gwaine has been involved in this whole thing, and that once we get the key and everything, we need to go and visit Gwaine. And then he kind of like nopes out. So everyone decides we're going to take a rest and like think about things. Meanwhile, Marcus, who's like the head guy over like the church and everything, from the church cutscene way in the back, he's sitting on his throne and he's talking to the guy in the black sky armor who is Einhart about the crew. Einhart leaves, and then the Pope rolls up. Marcus asks the Pope to arrange a meeting with Leanne. And then they talk about Sienna, who used to be the High Inquisitor. Let's see. And then the Pope heads out. Back over to the hideout. We start with Amalia, who's talking to Cress about how tense everyone is, and then we control her as she tries to like figure out how she can help everyone feel better. And then she gets like a little cooking mini game. It's really not much of a mini game. It's more just like you talk to everybody until you're done talking to them, and then she's like, I want to make a meal and bring everyone together so we can talk and like get along, since everyone's kind of tense. And then you have to decide who's gonna advice are you gonna use to cook each section of the meal, and then if you do it correctly, you get like different dialogue. Wah, wah, wah. So we do that. We go talk to everyone. We make our cute little meal, and it seems like everybody's super hungry and stuff. Let's see. And Molly proves that she's the perfect waifu, because she's magical and has a cute dog and is delightful and kind of an introvert, and then and she knows how to cook a good meal. So she cooks the meal, has a feast. Everyone's starting to get along again. Haku, we find out, has finished the repairs of the airship, and then Glenn still needs some more time to like think about stuff. He feels like using the stones and the gods is no different than Frederick using other people. So he's like, well, you know what? Let's just go to this the tome of Lady Renya first, and he'll kind of figure it out on the way. Farron is going to stay here and prepare the people for the resistance. But first, it's time to build up our clan some more and do some more side quests. So we do that. We meet Mika. Mika is the granddaughter of Tomake, and this is the part I mentioned where she like solves his like memory issues, and we get to go rescue her parents and go inside like the worm, and there's like a whole side quest to this. And she's very much the traditional like monk style character, like Final Fantasy style monk character. Like you can look all the way back into like the black belt from Final Fantasy 1, but like the monk from Final Fantasy 14 or like the Dungeons & Dragons kind of monk situation. It's just like a lot of punching and a lot of melee and then combos and stuff like that. So she's all right. I didn't really use her. But yeah, her parents got like 8. So the whole family is like really obsessed with food and finding food. And they came here originally to get some food or something. And her parents got eaten by like a giant sandworm. And so then you got to go in the sandworm. You got to like punch your way out of it and rescue them. And then they end up going back to like the home country while Tomake and Mika stick around and hang out. Let's see. Mika. It's very cute. It's a cute little story. There's also a goblin side quest to do at this point. We find out that Jan's daughter is turning into a goblin. So the goblins, the way they perpetuate is they don't have sex and birth. They like curse humans, and then the humans slowly turn into goblins. And so there's no real resolution to that. It's like we swear we'll find a cure, and I never did that. Maybe there's another side quest about that, but I never got around to doing it, so didn't happen. So at this juncture, we hit the tomb of Amalia's family, which there's a whole story about how. God, I should bring it up. Okay, yeah. So she explains that like 300 years ago, the royal family built sewers so that people could have like better lifestyle inside of Farnsport, but they didn't put it underneath the castle because the castle underneath the castle is where they kept all like that's where like the catacombs were, like the tombs for all the royalty. But then there was like the Mad Queen, and the Mad Queen is like, no, I want toilets in my fucking castle. And so they did that, but then they had to like move all the dead bodies to like a different tomb, and so the tomb is located like way north of Farnsport. Like you got to get there by like airship. And it was a funny story. I forgot how to summon the airship, and I thought you couldn't, and then I got like really mad because I was like running around because the game is like it's northwest or whatever of Farnsport, and I was trying to like walk there, and then I finally like realized that I was pressing the wrong button because I'm retarded, and then I summoned the airship and went there immediately. Anyway. We get in there, and then the crew talk about Glenn opening the secret passage, and he just like opens it automatically, and it's like, cool, how'd that happen? No one knows. Shut the fuck up. So we traverse deeper. Amalia and Bathraz are separated from the crew, and a voice tells them that they have to prove themselves worthy because they are not allowed to be in the sacred place because they're cursed. So then they get separated, and then Amalia sees a vision of her past. All the king's children were like killing each other. She kind of then the others are nearby, and they're calling out to help her, like they're just behind like a fucking wall. And then Amalia has to like fight herself. She gets more visions about her mother getting poisoned by like a concubine, and then she gets like the curse from the guy so she can heal her, because she just like wants this to be over and she wants to be safe, and she really wanted damaging magic so she could just kill everybody, but instead she got curing magic, which ended up saving her life because there's like a big feast when the king was feeling a little bit better, her father, and so all the heirs and stuff were sitting at the feast, and this is the vision Glenn got before, and they all ended up getting poisoned and killed, and the only one who's not poisoned and killed was Amalia because she had like the curse and it allowed her body to like be immune to the poison or whatever, and so she ended up being the heir, and then the king died, right? So at that point, the crew calls out to her, and she screams that she can take care of herself. And then we switch over to Bathraz, and he sees a vision of he's hanging out with his son and doing blacksmith stuff and hanging out, and then he has to fight himself. And then we see this group of the group he was working with and his son was with. They're like wandering around, and they're part of the Order of Lenore, and they get attacked by bandits, and everybody gets killed, including his son. And then his son calls for like help, and he gets a curse, and so he gains a new like night body, and he ends up killing a bunch of the bandits. And then they beat him, and the Bathraz loses. He like demands reparations or whatever, so then he gets the curse, and his curse is that he loses all his limbs, but then he can like summon swords and stuff, and then he has the ability to control metal, so then his son, who's not dead but is kind of fucked up, he like merges with his son. And throughout the game, I didn't mention this before, but Bathraz always says we, and I thought it was just a weird like lizard man thing, but no, it's like a specific him thing because he's speaking for him and his son because they've kind of combined into one person based on like, he uses his son's like metal limbs to like move around, and then he controls metal as well, and that that's like his curse or whatever. So he ends up killing the bandits and stuff. And then he is with Amalia, and they both get told their weakness is that they never ask for help, which is true. So they defy the voice, and they call for Glenn and crew to help, and then we switch over to them, and they have to fight this boss, and they rush in. And we see that Amalia is like doing fine, but Bathraz like fell unconscious. So she stays with him to protect him and like heal him up while they all go approach the tomb. When they get there, they're looking around for the key, and they just find like a flower on the body, and they get interrupted by Killian and Wyatt. And they say that Sienna led them there because Sienna had some like church thing. It's like the amulet that they used with that Victor used with like Glenn and to find Glenn and Leanne. I guess it was somewhat similar to the same situation with her, like the life anchor or whatever. And then they kneel down in front of Leanne. Oh yeah, so Killian he's still working for the church as like an inquisitor, and the Pope mentions the Pope wants to see her, and then Leanne gets a lot of guarantees that they're all going to be safe as long as they hand over the Grand Grimoire and stuff. And apparently this Eternal Lily flower is actually the key, so Wyatt takes that as well, and then they all leave. And now we're on board the Mary Lee, the Mary Lee, which is the floating island of the church. And while they're on board there, Glenn and Leanne both start recognizing a lot of stuff, and then Glenn gets an echo attack. So they rush him to a healer, leaving Wyatt alone. He praises God for like all the blessings and everything. And then the soldier runs over and is like, hey, the Grand Grimoire is gone. Killian took it and he left, and he's like, no. It's pretty funny. Over with Glenn, he is seeing Leanne and Timothy chatting in the past. They talk about how much they love each other, and then Van comes in all drunk and shit. He attacks Timothy. Leanne jumps in the way and gets gat, so she's dying. So Timothy takes her to get like the sponge of mana flora or something, so her echo can continue forward as she's dying. And then he also stabs himself so that his echo can go forward. And they love each other so much that someday they'll be able to find each other. The priest ends up sending them both, and that they promise that they'll find each other and whatnot. So she gets sent first, and then we see Timothy about to be sent. And then we come back to the present, and Haku is just chilling in her room when Glenn wakes up, and he realizes what's going on. And he's like, oh, I have to go tell Leanne. So then he runs off to inform her that he thinks he's Timothy and that they found each other. So we got some time now to kind of wander around and just like chit-chat with people. We find out that the original sky armors that were created were all named after the wise men from like Christ's birth, right? So just like the wise men from Chrono Trigger, so another like homage, I guess. We then find the princess just kind of like hanging out. Glenn tells Leanne about their past love. She freaks the fuck out, and then runs off. And then my wife, Malia, is like, bro, chill. We then head over to Frederick and his homies. Killian rolls in. He's like, I got the Grand Grimoire, but he wants to be a general now and join the ranks. And I'm like, motherfucker, this dude is like all over the fucking place. The guy who made this game, or the people who made this game, like real hard on for Killian, because like I'd be good with him just not being around like the whole game. Like I don't find him interesting. I don't feel like he really has like an arc per se, and like his backstory is super boring, and it makes the ending very frustrating. And we'll get to there when we get there. I just want to bring this up because it's like, oh my god, this guy again. Like I do not give a fuck about Killian. Like I didn't like him when he was like a part of the main cast like originally, but now he's just kind of like a side character that's wandering around doing shit, which is very like Final Fantasy Tactics, and I don't know if that was intentional because so much of this game is like homage, right? But you have like Delphia, who was like him and Ramza from Final Fantasy Tactics are like super best friends and grew up together, and then like I didn't like about this about Final Fantasy Tactics either, is like you're playing Ramza and his crew and his hot sister and whatnot, and then we keep like bouncing back to Delphia doing stuff, and I was like, I literally don't give a fuck about any of this. It has nothing to do with the main plot of the game. Like literally, people will like write essays about how like it's so important and all this stuff and world building and bullshit, and it's like I literally don't give a fuck about anything Delphia does. Like if I could just like skip those sections, I would get much more enjoyment out of this game, and it would be less confusing because it's just like random bullshit that's going on over there. Like I'm playing a fucking video game. Like I do not give a fuck about what's going on over there if it has no effect directly. And like Delphia like shows, I think it's the same, shows back up a couple times in Ramza's like main story, but like not enough, right? Anyway, I just don't like it. I don't like it here either. So it's not just this guy, but it's like this idea that like, oh, we're gonna have this other character that I love. It's like the DMPC, if you ever play games like that, where you have like the NPC that the dungeon master is like moving around, and he is like, it's like he or she is like the girl that is the key to everything, and it's just like annoying because it's like I'm the player character. I want to be the girl that I want to be the girl that is the key to everything. I don't want that motherfucker over there to be the girl that's the key to everything. Stupid. Anyway. Yes, okay, so then they talk about how they're planning an attack on Mary Lee, that's what it's called. Or Mary Lee, I guess, I don't know. English is terrible English. So we head back at the Glen. We find Amalia talking to Crest. She approaches Bathraz and starts chatting. And we find out she gave up her future for magic, so she's only got like a year or two left to live, which breaks my heart because it's not enough time for her to become an adult so I can marry her. Anyway, they talk about lifting the curse and how there is likely no way to do that in their lifetime, or her lifetime at least. We then explore some more, and then we all meet up. Sienna reveals that she used to be a member of the church, which I could have sworn she'd done this before, and also that she was a High Inquisitor. Everyone is like, we know, except Eagle, who's like, what? Because he's special. Yep, that kind of special. Later that evening, Rob and Eagle are just chit-chatting. Rob is confused by how Eagle is holding together with the death of all his people and everything, and we're at like the church headquarters where the church treats people like such shit and whatnot. And Eagle is like, I don't blame random members for the decision to higher ups, which is based. That's exactly how you should do it. And then Rob has an issue with the members of the Tarn household because of everything, because they treated him worse than garbage. So they talk about that for a while, and kind of like Eagle kind of helps him like hash a lot of that out so they can become best friends forever. Meanwhile, Victor and Bathraz talk about killing someone to free Leanne. Okay. And then later on, even more, the Pope is yelling at Ava and Raphael, losing the Grimoire, losing Killian. He then meets up with Leanne. Marcus comes in, and he's like, Pope, get the fuck out of here. The Pope's like, okie dokie. So he introduces himself as the leader of the Gadambrath Society. She mentions the Order of Leonore, and he walks up to her and does something. like does some sort of like examination, like casts Libro. He then talks about the three guardians being gone, and then starts talking about the vein and how he repeats a lot of the stuff that Gawain said about how they became gods, how they repeat destruction, and how they need to destroy them, and the history and all that stuff. And so he talks about how the society created these maidens, just like we learned before, to pass on the knowledge, and then they got the grimoire and they started creating monsters because they wanted to absorb ether so that the church did. So and the reason they wanted to create monsters is so they could gather up enough ether so they could use a grimoire and it would not kill humans, but it would be able to absorb all the ether so they could use it to kill the vein, right? And so that lump of flesh we saw a while ago, that was like the not the antithesis, that was like the conclusion or the final thing of like their goal is that they have this giant lump of flesh that just contains ether, and it's not like alive. It's alive enough where they can use the Grand Grimoire and supercharge it so they can use it against the vein and destroy them. Okay. And he compares himself to Frederick, who uses humans and how they're better. And then he talks about needing three things. He says that to destroy the vein, you need the Grand Grimoire, the key, which is the rose we got from Lady Renya's grave, or Rhaenys whatever grave. So he gives that back to us, and then we need access to a door. He then reveals that the grimoire was stolen, and right as he says that, Tarn attacks, and the church is having like a real struggle session with the battle. So Marcus is he's going to take Leanne and the Pope, and they're all going to flee the fuck out of there. So we head back to like the rest of the crew, like Glenn and stuff. They talk about how they need to grab Leanne and flee, and we work our way through like the flying church areas. Eventually we run into Leanne, the Pope, and Marcus. Bath runs up and kills the Pope immediately, and then he tries to attack Marcus, who's like, nope, and teleports out of there. He states that Marcus is a liar, that he took control of the church, and he split from the Order of Lenore, and that he actually wants to kill the Vayne as he wants to bring the Harbinger back. So while he has the same goal as Gawain and us to some extent, that he's doing it so that he can bring the Harbinger back to like destroy everything, like essentially it's like a death cult or whatever. Leanne then slaps Bath Thraz for keeping all these secrets, and then she apologizes immediately because women, am I right? Well written, gotta give him that. She then joins up, and we keep moving. We rescue some people from monsters that were escaping, and then elsewhere we see Ava finds the monsters in the cage, and she's like, holy shit, my wife was right, and realizes Santa told everything she told her was true. So we get to the harbor, and then there we run into Raphael. He tells us when he was a little boy, how the Pope came and rescued him, that he was like super sick and whatnot, and since we just killed the Pope, that he's here for revenge or whatever. So Sienna is like, bro, you made a deal with the devil. Then Ava rolls up. She calls Sienna out for being a lesbian. Oh, this is where we find out she's the wife. Okay, yeah, for being a lesbian. And no, she calls her. I said JK, my bad. Stupid fucking notes. I could stop writing jokes to myself. Okay, so she rolls up and she calls Ava out for being for leaving the church, and this is where but she does mention this is where they're married, or were married. I think they're still married. So then it's time to fight. So we beat the two of them, and they say some more stuff about the church being destroyed, and then we fly away. Glenn then counts. Counts on the grimoire being used, and we jump over to Killian. He's flying over to use the grimoire on the church, and then we get a little flashback to when he turned over. So he's like, I want to be a general. So then we go back to that, flashback to that point. As part of the deal to become a general, he had to go use the grimoire against the Mary Lay. He starts to have some doubts while thinking about Glenn, and this causes Killian to think about his sister. And there's a whole thing that when the last time they spoke, Glenn kept being like, is this what your sister wants? Your sister's going to wake up and you're going to be a monster. Does that make you happy? And so he hesitates and gets shot by one of these like random laser beams that some of these like sky fortresses seem to have. And then his sky armor and the grimoire sink into the ocean. And then the Mary Lee starts to fall. Frederick is thinking about his victory, destroyed the church. So good enough. He just fuck the grimoire. He doesn't give a shit about that. And then a soldier runs in and he talks about there's been a coup that Farron has led it, while we're all distracted doing this shit, like they've taken over Tarn and a bunch of other places, and Frederick's like, unimpressed. I don't give a fuck. Elsewhere, June and Gawain go and they rescue Killian, or they bring his like battered dead body, almost like not quite dead, and they get the Grand Grimoire. They're like on some ship. He's going on about something, how he's going to resurrect Killian and all this stuff, and that he can be a replacement if Glenn falters. Dun, dun, dun. What does that mean? Oh. Elsewhere, again, Marcus and Einhart in his armor talk about the Grand Grimoire and how they don't really need it because Glenn and his people can use it, and if they really want, they can go grab it later. And how like it doesn't matter if Gawain has it either because they both want to kill the Vayne and then they can deal with whatever they're dealing with afterwards. And they talk about how with the Guardians being dead, it's like, you know, the Harbinger being reborn is like kind of inevitable. So that's we don't see much of them through the rest of the game, to be completely honest. They're just like, cool. So that's fine. Gawain can have it. He wants to kill the Vayne. We want to kill the Vayne. Everything's great. So they'll just wait. Kind of figure it out then. So Glenn then talks to Leanne on the airship, and she's like, are you sure you're actually Timothy? Dun, dun, dun. And then we get a recap of all the past memories and whatnot. And we see that right before Timothy was sent. So, like, Leanne was sent using that, like, magic spell. And then Timothy was about to be sent, but that Van came in. Uh-oh. And he stabs Timothy and dies. And then Glenn, who is actually Van, what? He stabs himself to die, and then he gets the priest to send him so he can chase after his, like, Leanne this whole time. What? Glenn then, who realizes now, freaks the fuck out. And then we go to one of those recap screens where it's like, okay, some time went by. We're doing that Final Fantasy Tactics thing. We're just giving you, like, we're lore dumping history on you. So while Frederick fought the church, the people of Valandis, like, revolted. Frederick took his troops to the Raminus Tower to rest and recover. He threatened to use the Grand Grimoire in Tormund if they did not surrender after a certain amount of time. That amount of time is as much time as we fucking want because we get to open up like another open world section where we can just go and like do side quests and shit and build up our clan some more. And then we get a scene with like Frederick talking to his generals. They're all like super pissed and they're like, no, you gotta reconsider, don't do this. And Frederick's like, no, I have a plan. Then to the headquarters, Glenn is still passed out, and Beth Thoraz mentions that this happened before when someone like got too much echo, right? And we talked about this before. They bring up the witch from that one side quest, Magnolia. Yeah, I think her name was Magnolia. And how she was able to help, you know, the coma thing. And I was like, man, I thought that was a fucking side quest. Do we have to do side quests to get like the main quest? Like maybe. Or maybe the dialogue's just different. Maybe he's just like, I know somebody. It's like, that would be excellent, like programming, like, to be completely honest. But I don't know, because I did that side quest. So I felt the same thing about like the Madeline thing with the city of Nysa, because we have to go there, and there's a whole scene with her outside of there. So I don't know if that's something like if you don't do the side quest, it just like is different, or if it's you have to do the side quest, which makes it not a side quest. But yeah, I'm not too sure. So. So we bring Magnolia over, and then Victor wants her to send us into Glenn's mind to heal him, but she needs someone to open the door, and then she senses like the flower of Rhaina, which is the key to open the door, and she's like, oh, I can just use that. Because it holds the soul of Rhaina, and for some reason that like allows the door to be open or something. And that is actually something that some crazy person said like a long time ago. Like I vaguely remember it, but I don't remember exactly. I think it was the guy who was like putting souls into like flowers and whatnot, but don't quote me on that because I don't exactly remember. She then opens the door and is like, bye-bye, and everybody heads into Glenn's mind. So once we're all inside Glenn's head, there is a whole bunch of gates. So we gotta close all the gates or find all the gates or something, and that will lead to the healing of Glenn. And then those creepy kids from the orphanage show up. They're like, get out of here. Leanne argues with them, and then Magnolia shows up, and she's like, you get out of here, and she scats them out of there. So we go through the first gate. We see a vision of some guy. He's beating up a kid because the kid stole money that the guy needed for his daughter's surgery or something. And then a priest comes by after the kid's all beat up, feeds him, gives him clothes. We find out his name's Bartholomew, and immediately Victor's like, I know this guy. We find out that Bartholomew is very clever and that he got picked up. So the priest recognized that, and that he started studying at Nysa. And that he revolutionized magic and all this stuff because he was so wise and so crafty and so clever, but he didn't have an aptitude for magic. And then he was known as one of the greatest minds of Nysa. And then we find out later that he became the master of Victor and Gawain, who studied there. And also, dun dun dun, that it's Glenn. So he rescued Victor when he was wounded, broken on the street after he'd been robbed from like his musical career or whatever. A bit later, once Victor graduates from school, Bartholomew asks him to do the Mana Flora spell. Now, I mentioned this before. The Mana Flora spell is the one that takes your echo and like perpetuates it forward with like keeping everything so it doesn't get distilled in like the maelstrom or whatever. And the Bartholomew, he like had remembered enough of his past because of what he got the Mana Flora when he was Van, that he wants to meet up with Leanne and apologize to her and make sure that she's okay. Bartholomew creates the amulets that the life anchors that Victor and Bathraz used to find Leanne and Glenn, right? So he kind of set all this stuff in motion, and he just like had a whole lifetime of like studying this stuff and all this and whatnot. So he teaches the Manaflora spell to Victor, and then Victor's job is continually, because Victor lives for like 1,000 years, he's continually supposed to track down Glenn in whatever form he appears in, and then use the Manaflora spell on him again to perpetuate and to keep looking for Leanne so they can eventually be teamed up together. And the main point again is that Van / Glenn / all these different people that we're going to start seeing in Glenn's mind want to make it up to her for like destroying the love of her life and like causing all these problems. So then we go to the next gate. It's just a boss. We beat his weak ass, and then we see this building on fire, and there's this huge guy named Renderam, and Victor runs into him, and he's like, "Master!" And Renderam's like, "Oh, it's about time, bro." Victor apologizes, and Rob's like, "I know that guy." He's like a famous fireman or something, who did a lot of good throughout the world or whatever. And then when they pop back out of that story, Rob asks Victor if all the plays, or he recognizes him because he was the main character of a play that Victor wrote. And then when they come back out of like that memory, but Rob asks Victor if all his plays, all his stories are Glenn's lives, and Victor's like, "Tee-hee." And Leanne asks how many times that happened, and that Glenn was reborn before this current time, and he's like, "I don't know, it's too many to count," right? And then Magnolia talks about she loves Glenn, and she's all about that Glenn and everything like that. So the next gate is just like some hallway we go down. We then find a boy on the verge of death. Victor finds him just in time. His name's Jonas. He ends up inventing the printing press with Victor, right? And he ends up getting married, having kids, having a whole like wonderful life. And then we head back to the present. And then we run into the Nerd Patrol. Yeah, so the kids in the orphanage, they want to fight. So now we got a boss battle with them. We beat the shit out of them, and then all the Glens start to merge with Glenn, and then Glenn like recalls everything now, and he's like back to his self, I guess. Victor calls him master. Him and Glenn talk about what Glenn thinks he has done and what is reality and all this stuff. And then Leanne talks to him about forgiveness and how he's not Van, and he apologizes anyway, and she explains that his good deeds don't overwrite his bad deeds, but that the life he's living now is a good person, and she admires him for all the sacrifice stuff he's doing. And it's very interesting because it's like, oh, this is all like sweet stuff, and it's like forgiveness and all the stuff he's done, but I don't know. Glenn in this story has been kind of like a whiny bitch for the most part, who is like, you know, he's kind of done some okay things, but it's always been kind of like, oh, I don't know. He's got a very like Shinji Ikari kind of vibe to him. Right. And so I'm like, I mean, he's like doing good stuff, I guess. I mean, he's trying to stop war, but I don't know how successful he's been or anything. But I just feel like I wasn't totally bought into like this part of the story where it's like, okay, we did a lot of good things in his past life that we saw, but like in this current life, I don't know, man. He's done some okay things, but I'm just like, I don't know. Glenn thinks about how he has so many questions still, and that he needs to talk to Gwen to figure everything else out. About the door, about the red eyes that keep popping up, which are like the Van or the gods or something. Anyway, so we get out of his mind. Everything's good. The crew meets up in the headquarters. Glenn does a little speech, which is actually good. We find out that as soon as Glenn kind of came through, Magnolia noped out of there with the flower. And so the time is now to kind of plan what to do about Frederick. And everyone talks about how they're going to take a small group and attack the tower so they can kind of sneak in and take care of things. But first of all, we're going to do all the side quests and get the rest of the people for Hermit's Isle. So we'll talk about a couple of the side quests because they deal with new characters. So the first new optional character is Raphael. So we travel back to the town where we left Arlette, and she keeps disappearing, and so people are concerned about her. And Arlette is the lady that was being raised by the weird flower guy at the end. So we run off in the mountains to find her, and we find Raphael's there, and Arlette's trying to keep him alive because he just kind of wanted to like die. And then he runs off, she follows him, there's an earthquake, they end up in a cavern, and Raphael fights these vampire bats until he passes out, and we're able to rescue him before it's too late. He then questions like, why did he try to survive? Does he have something to live for now? He has like this Arlette girl he can take care of, and now he wants to live. So then he joins up, and he's like a two-handed fighter. / tank. So kind of mixture between Killian when we had him before and Eagle now. I never used either of them because in my playthrough it was unnecessary. And then the other member we find, we get this quest where these guys want to find gems in like the secret forest, so we're going to go over there and they're going to pay us a ton of money. So we head over there and we find out that this secret forest that no one's supposed to go to leads to like a fairy homeworld. And inside there, we find out that the fairies, when they die, their hearts become crystals, and we go and we like fight the queen of the fairies, and then we come out and all the fairies were killed by these assholes, and then Magnolia, and so we end up killing them, and then Magnolia like the or no, so the fairies summon like a new queen. The queen kills all the guys, and then Magnolia has to help us like defeat the new queen, because we find out that Magnolia used to be the queen of the fairies, and that she left because she didn't want to like fight humans anymore or something. Anyway, she finally joins, and she goes immediately in my party, and she's kind of like a, I don't want to say she's like Setzer, but she's like a gambler type character where she has like every elemental. She's the only one who has like access to all the elementals. But every time she pulls like a random card, and like 1 misses, 2 through 6, I think, attacks one person, and each kind of like 6 does more damage than 2, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 hit everybody. And so she replaces Leanne, and I have her, Glenn, Amalia, who's my favorite character, and Batharaz, who's my second favorite character, for like the rest of the game. That's pretty much the crew I roll with outside of the Skyarmors. So after doing all those side quests and everything, it's finally time to head to the tower of like Remedras or whatever to confront Frederick. So first, we get a little shot of Kenrick and Alyssa, 2 of the generals. They're talking to Guston about how they're going to leave, how they can't stand Frederick trying to attack his own people, and that Kenrick's like, I'm a grandfather, essentially, like I'm not going to deal with this. And Guston's like, I will always serve the king. And so Kenrick kills him, and Alyssa and Kenrick head out. Elsewhere, we see a soldier run up to Frederick at the top of the tower, and he's like, oh, the enemies have arrived. And Kenrick and Alyssa come, they kill the king's guards, and then they try to attack Frederick, but all the magic power they got from the grimoire is gone, and that's because Frederick also got power from the grimoire to seal magic. And so then they can't use their thing, and he's like, Gawain, kill them. And so he does, because his magic is not sealed, because it's actually true magic, right? So we have the magic that comes from the grimoire, the magic that comes from the curse, and then there's true magic, which is what Victor and Gawain have, and it cannot be sealed. We then head on in with our mechs and wander around the tower for a bit. We eventually get to this elevator that takes us up to the top of the tower, and as we're going, Cress cries out, which saves Amalia from Maria. Maria is the Valkyrie lady who almost killed Leanne before. So she pops down with 2 of her characters, and this might be like the hardest battle of the game. And even for me, I don't think I died, but it was like very intense, because she has these 2 sidekicks, and they like are healing each other and like doing these crazy attacks, and I have to keep healing myself and switching dudes out. It was pretty intense, so it kind of gave me like a taste of like if you play this game on like an actual hard difficulty, which you probably get. So it's fun. Maria never forgives Leanne for her betrayal after we beat her, and then she dies. And this leads us directly to Frederick. So Leanne is like, we're here to stop you. You're not my brother. And he laughs, and he's like, you can't stop me. I've already won. And they're like, Nani desu ka? And he says, I have created a villain to unite all the people of Valandis against me, so that you or Amalia will then become the leader of United Valandis finally, because there's no way everyone could have. So his plan, essentially, the way he describes it, is, and part of the reason he didn't want to use the grimoire anymore is because his plan was to unite everybody in, like, he had like a pure heart. Like, he did all this crazy stuff, and the taxes and all this stuff didn't make any sense, and killing all these people was like, he was playing like the long con, because the thing was, he was trying to create himself as this horrible tyrant and just like get everybody to put away their grievances against each other, to unite into one faction that could protect and destroy the Nebralia, so they couldn't be a factor, so that Valandis can finally be free of war for like good. And so it's like very interesting. And then him and Leanne go back and forth about this, and she's like, even and after he kills himself, right? But he tells he tells Leanne to be like, you tell them, like, you tell the people that you did this, so because they will rally behind you and whatnot. So it's pretty epic, right? And it's one of those things like, do the ends justify the means? And it's like, well, a lot of people died and a lot of people suffered, but at the end of the day, like, war, like, they're done. Like, war is over. Like, the nations are going to be united. They're all going to work together, and there may be some pain, but people are going to be like, this is better than having like that tyrant or whatever. He then tells us, as he's dying, that Gawain is upstairs, and tells us not to let him use the grimoire. And then Leanne holds him as he dies, and she says she cannot forgive him, but a part of him will always remember him as her brother. So that was good. Top of the tower, Glenn tells Gawain to hand over the stone, and Gawain instead uses the stone. The Vayne instantly sense him, and they lose. They like summon this like giant monster from the sea that starts like blowing up stuff, sending fire everywhere. Like, they're gonna like blow this, they're gonna kill all the humans, right, essentially, so that he doesn't use the stone anymore and to get revenge and whatnot. He then tosses Gawain then tosses Glenn the stone and tells him that we have to use it against a monster, and that'll power it up enough so that we can use it against the Vayne, and that will give us enough ether. Glenn then gives like an actual pretty good speech. He helps Leanne stop being hopeless, because she doesn't think we can do this, and then we go ahead and mount up. And on the way, over there with our sky armor, we run into like this crystal dragon demon thingy. So we beat that ass, and then we dive into like the creature and use a grimoire, and it destroys it completely. And then the van are like super pissed off. They call us fools, that we've damned the Landis, and then they create like a giant fireball in the sky, and they're like, we will destroy this entire continent. Like, fuck y'all. And then while they're doing that, this voice like shows up and like dismisses them, and it's this guy in the armor, and he tells us, he tells the team that Gawain is holding back the fireball, and that he waits for Gawain that he waits for Glenn at the center of Nysa. Leon tells him to show himself, and the guy just like takes his helmet off, and there's no armor. I mean, there's no body. There's just like armor. And we find out this is Killian. That Killian's existence was like shoved into this armor. That's how Gawain like saved him or whatever. And then he heads out. Later on, the whole team is meeting back up at Hermit Island, planning to head to Nysa to fight our way through to where Gawain is. Everyone needs to take care of everything they need to before they go. This is like our last chance before we head out. A bit later in that evening, Glenn approaches Leanne. He calls her out for shutting everyone else out. Which, okay. They talk about the burden of their past lives and everything that's going on, and then Glenn is able to comfort her and make her feel better about life generally. We get back, so we head back down to Nysa, and Madeline, who's the lady we took down in the first place, who told us about the True Kings and everything. We find her knocked out, so Amalia heals her, and she mentions that she got jumped by some bandits. It's our old friends, the Brothers Grimm or whatever. So we help her, and so tell her to rest and that she can head in a little bit later. So we go in, and we see someone from the church approaching. Glenn has like a fit, and then ghosts appear. So now we can meander about Nysa. This level kind of sucks. It's a lot of like, you gotta find 3 keys, you gotta wander around a lot and like kill things or whatever. And there's like a couple like mini bosses that I just stumbled into. During this time, the band reach out. They call us foolish children. They talk about the Maelstrom is the prisoner of the Harbinger. So that's interesting. And that the Ether is a cage. So like the more that humans are born, and this is something Magnolia mentioned before, that like the Ether gets spread out too much and becomes too thin, and the Maelstrom starts to like lose all its Ether. And if it lost all its Ether, the Harbinger would be able to come out of its cage and kill everything. So the fact that they have to like keep they feel justified in having to kill humans over and over again to like refill up the Maelstrom. And that the church with its like lumps of flesh are like causing a lot of problems, and this is why humanity, has to be destroyed again and again. Let's see, okay, and then we argue back that like this is not allowing humanity to find a weapon to destroy the Harbinger because we're not able to like gather enough forces or enough mindset or whatever. And so then the crew talks about how we got to just kill the vein and then we can figure out the rest later. Later on in the area, we find the boys, the ones that are cribbing off Final Fantasy 12. And they're like, they found a big treasure trove, and it's like, they're like, uh-oh. And Sienna's like, just grab your treasure and get the fuck out of here and stop being bandits. And they're like, okie dokie. And so they leave. So that wraps that up, I guess. Problem solved. As I mentioned before, we just keep stumbling into kind of like these mini bosses. So we run into this boss, and we just beat it up, and then Killian rolls out of the wall, right? Apparently the monster is one of the Harbinger's creatures, and it's trying to stop us. Or these Harbinger creatures are apparently targeting Glenn for some reason or another, right? Like this wasn't brought up a lot, but like at the very beginning of the game, if you remember, there was like a whole thing with like, oh yeah, these monsters, they're all, they're here to get you, Glenn. That's why they want to fight you for whatever random reason. And it's like, okie dokie, sounds good. Why? No idea why, but I guess that's what they want to do. So, then Killian starts talking about how Glenn is like a failed successor or something, and that Killian's actually going to be the successor or something. And then we're like, what does that mean? And he nopes out. Further in, we get this fun little thing where we get to talk to a bunch of NPCs, and through that we get to like design the boss we're going to fight, which is like a big slime boss. And it's kind of like okie dokie. Oh my gosh. And so that whole section is kind of like funny. Anyway, so you kind of want to like whatever your main characters are that you're using or you like using, you can design like you can kind of by talking to people, you can design how you want like the boss to be to fit to like its weaknesses or your play style, whatever, which is like a good thought. But again, this is one of those games where it's kind of like, well, okay, I guess that's cool and stuff, but I mean, none of the characters are like vastly that different, so whatever. Anyway, it's a cute idea. Let's see. And then he gives us the final key that we need to get to Gawain. Next up, we run into Wyatt. Yep, Wyatt, the big boy, the big Inquisitor guy. He's super mad that we killed the Pope, and he has like the sweet spear thing. So we beat him up, and then he tries to cheat by using some sort of concoction, but Ava rolls up, and she stabs him in the back, and he's like, no! And so he stumbles and falls off a bridge, but he also attacks Ava and curses us or whatever. Amalia quickly rushes over to help Ava. She apologizes to Sienna for not believing her and all this stuff, and she's all beat up, but Amelia and her both agree that she'll survive, so we need to keep going and deal with the vein or whatever. We finally get to this giant ass like fucking vein door, and Gawain and Killian are there. Gawain explains that he arrived at the academy many years ago, and that he started influencing Glenn to be his successor. We then learn that Gawain is some sort of like, he's not whatever race Victor is. He's like a pre-mortal or prehistorical race, and that Gawain has lived for like far longer than like Victor's race. I think the Victor's race is like the Au or the Air or something like that. And that Gawain's been slowly working on Glenn, because Glenn has, he keeps like reliving these lives to match his ether, so that his ether will match Gawain, so Gawain can pass his powers on. Because even though Gawain has lived for like forever, he can't live forever ever, right? And because of this is how Glenn was able to manifest the orphans, right? Like Victor was looking at one of the orphans because he actually literally manifests them and then cast them away. That's how he was able to avoid being stopped in time. That's how he can access the door. All this stuff is because he essentially is becoming Gawain's successor. And what is Gawain? We'll find out in a second. And it's the reason he's able to resist the vein and use the grimoire. So Glenn is successor. And this surprises Killian, because he just told us like 5 seconds ago that he was the successor because Glenn was a failed successor. And Gawain's like, no, he's fine. And so Gawain reveals like, at this point, like he's been alive for tens of thousands of years. He's long before the Harbinger, long before humanity existed. But like finally he's at the end of his life. And Killian's like, what about me? And Gawain's like, shut the fuck up. And then Killian is super sad. And then Gawain starts pouring all of his ether into Glenn to finalize the process. And Lance tries to stop Gawain but can't, and then Killian stabs him in the back, which causes Gawain to lose control of the ether. Killian starts feasting on it, and then Killian resurrects his body. Gawain is like, kill him and take the ether back. And at that point he dies, and Killian thinks he's some sort of god, and that's because he is. Because what Gawain was, he was the 8th true king, the human true king, right? Some of the true kings are like these everlasting beings of superpower and whatnot, and because that's what he was trying to set up, was Glenn as his successor, and then Killian took it. So now Killian's the 8th true king. Anyway, he's weakened by the power of Gawain resisting him, because like he didn't set all this up, and so he doesn't have like his full power to be like completely like a god, like a true king. So we beat him up real good, and then him and Glenn go back and forth about what Killian wants to do, about his true power, and then Killian becomes this like Sephiroth style amalgamation, and this is like the final battle. I don't think we fight the Bane. In the Bane, Killian doing something completely separate. I can't remember. Okay, we'll get there in a second if we do. Okay, so we fight him again, we beat him again, and then he reads our minds, and he reads the phase for the door, so that, okay, this leads right into the final battle. So we beat him, and then he gets the passphrase for the door, he opens the door, because he's going to release the vein so he can start attacking him, but then immediately the vein are like, oh, get that weak ass, and so they merge with Killian, the whole vein, like all the vein, because I guess they're merged as like one god, and so then they become like the true king power plus the vein. And so Glenn is like, all right, everybody, let's activate the grimoire. This drains the power of the vein and destroys the grimoire, because there's nobody else around here to like absorb the ether once it destroys them, and everyone else is like really tightly squeezed around like the 3 meter area or whatever, or the 3 foot area. But the Vein's not actually dead. Oh no! Killian calls out. He is still fighting for power over the Vein, over like his existence. So he's fighting with the inside. The Vein are like weakened because of the Grimoire, and so now we have this like kind of fun, wacky fight. And it's like a story battle. I don't know if you can lose this, because you just like fight and kill different parts of, or you don't kill. You just keep fighting, and then the Vein keep doing things like end the world, and then Killian keeps like undoing it. Like it's like okay. And it just keeps happening, and it honestly goes on for too long. Like, it was very interesting at first, but then it just like takes a while. It's like if you did Omni Slash against Sephiroth like 3 or 4 times, and then he lost at the end of Final Fantasy VII, and it'd be like, okay, the first time was badass, but then after it happens like for the 4th time, you're like, all right, you're like looking at your watch, you're like, is this game gonna fucking end? But eventually we take it down, and the screen goes white. Killian and Glenn, they hash some stuff out, and then Killian kills himself, and the power of the True King enters Glenn. With the death of the Vein, the city starts to completely fall apart, and as the crew runs away, a Sandiel, the Dragon True King, he gets in their way, but then Glenn's just like, get the fuck out of here, and then the dragon's like, okie dokie. And then he leaves, and then Glenn passes out. We get some more recap screen. The fire in the heavens vanished. The people rejoice. Leanne, as Celestia, was elected to be the new queen of all Volandis, and that's not how queens work, so essentially she's the president, but whatever. Later, there's some ball. Sienna and Ava and Haku are all talking about Sienna's nickname, like the Crimson, whatever, at the beginning of the game we got. Rob and Eagle are talking about Eagle's plans to travel and how Rob's going to go and be a squire. Victor and Cameron are getting turned up. Like drunk as shit. And then Leanne rushes in, followed by Amalia. Because guess what? This was a surprise birthday party for Amalia. Yay, she's 15 now, almost there. So Bathraz isn't there, though, because he left to prepare the Order of Lenore to fight the Harbinger, right? And then we flash back a little bit, and we see Amalia rushing up to Bathaz, like earlier in the day, Bathraz. He tells her that he seeks a way to save her, just like she saved him in Rana's tomb. And then we come back. Glenn's also missing. Leanne goes out to find him, and he's just like chilling on the balcony doing introvert stuff like Glenn does. He mentions that he's leaving, and she mentions his power and the reigniting of the Order of Lenore to fight the Harbinger. A red bird then lands nearby, and Leanne mentions that he's been coming all day and that she named him Glenn, which is precious. And then we find out that this Glenn that we see is dun dun dun. It's not Glenn. And Leanne knew all along. So then we head back to that white space where Glenn and Glenn were speaking. And then Glenn tells his sad story about how his mother had to have sex with guards so that they could like live a comfortable life in Golgotha, and how every day he'd just look up and see the birds and wish that he could just fly away and not have any more stress in his life. And that he tells Killian, like, I'm done with life. Like, you have a lot of will to like do things and you want to change the world and do all this stuff, and I don't. I'm done. I just wish I wish I could just be reborn as a bird. And then back to the present, Killian, we find out that Killian's adorned as Glenn, right? And then he's like, all right, well, I'm going to go. And Leanne's like, well, good luck with everything. And then Bird Glenn goes with him. And then we skip ahead a little bit later, and there's a boat. And on that boat, he transforms back into Killian. And then some girl runs up, and she's like, oh, you're the guy with the double face. And then the captain of the ship comes up and is like, get out of here, Stoy. We're going to throw you overboard. And then Killian's like, no, I'll pay your passage. Here you go. And then we find out this girl's name is June, which is Gwen's girlfriend. But she's like a little kid. And I'm like, what? I have a lot of questions. Don't worry, the DLC doesn't cover it, which I'm going to get to. She's stuck on board because some masked man told her to find the guy with many faces. Who's this masked man? I don't know. But here she is, and then she's going to hang out with Killian and do whatever. And then Killian releases Glenn from the cage, and he flies away. And then we get the end credits, and the credit scenes are cute. We get the bird flying around. It's kind of like Terranigma, if you ever played that. It's like a game that never came to America, but you can find it easy with like a great English translation just on like a ROM. Anyway, we see Rob and Eagle training, Sienna being a thief, and then Ava being like, no, sweetie, no more of that. And Sienna's being like, oh, my wife's so mean. Magnolia just out being a fairy doing shit. Victor singing in a band and kicking it with Cameron, getting turned up some more. We see Amalia helping people heal with Cress, who has a bunch of babies now. We get Killian visiting his sister at the very end, who finally awakens from her coma, and he like cries and stuff. And then we see Raphael, Ava, and Arlette restarting church efforts, so it's all good stuff. And that's the end of the game. All right, so it still has a lot of questions, like what are they going to do with the Harbinger? What are they going to do with all this stuff? I don't know if this game is a sequel. I guess I could look that up real quick. Nah, I'm not going to look it up. But yeah, so that's the game. It was super enjoyable. I really, like, this is definitely one of the top 5 games of the year that I played. At times I was like, I don't know if I like this or Clair Obscur more when it came to like just games in general, but also turn-based RPGs. But I think I enjoyed Clair Obscur more because I like the combat system. I felt like was better. That's really what it comes down to. Like the stories are both good, very interesting. Clair Obscur is much better written, right? But there's something more enduring to me about. There's like the nostalgia thing when it comes to the pixelated graphics and everything. I like all the different things. I'm a sucker for mech stuff, regardless of how well it's implemented. So yeah, this is definitely unless something happens in the next like month, this is definitely gonna be one of my games of the year. I think I'm posting unless I'm posting this in January, then it's gonna be a game of the year next year. So if you'll see this in January, that's what's gonna happen. It's gonna be in the contention for game of the year next year, and then Clair Obscur just like runs away with it this year because the game is so fucking awesome. There's some other good games, like some of the Shining games I played were pretty good as well. But anyway, so let's talk about the DLC. The DLC is it's not shit. It's like, again, if at the beginning I kind of talked about this. So I played it for like an hour or two, and I was just not feeling it because it does that thing where it's like, oh, here's like DLC, and instead of being like, what happens next, especially because the game left, I'm like, almost like, you better get ready for the next version. Like not a complete, what is it in English? not a complete like setup for like a further game, but there's like so many questions unanswered. The thing with the Harbinger is like a huge thing, and this is just like, hey, you get, and for me, it's like I think I would have been fine with this DLC if it had just been like built into the game, but you cannot play it while you're playing your regular walkthrough, and in fact, it has systems built into it. So you load your save, right? And then, so you start the DLC, you start it from the main menu, and then you can load your save into it, but you can't carry your save back over. Well, you might be able to, but as far as I'm tracking, you can't carry your save back over. And so it's just like, it's like a separate game with like the same characters, and it just was like, I don't, and this kind of what really sold me on like the idea between that I like this or Claire Obscura more, and definitely Claire Obscura more, because I still think about some of the characters from Claire Obscura, and I'm just like, those characters are fucking awesome. And that world was cool. And this world was super cool. And I like some of these characters, but like none of them really held my heart besides Amalia. But like every single one of the main characters in Claire Obscura and the bad guys and the whole thing was just like fucking fantastic, right? And what emphasized that for me is I start playing this and the characters are doing stuff and I'm almost like, I don't give a fuck about any of this stuff, right? And like, and so if you just like love the system in this game and you are in love with these characters, I would say the DLC is 100% worth your time and effort. I don't know if you can buy the game without the DLC at this point. You just buy like the whatever edition on Steam or GOG or wherever you buy this fucking game. And it's going to be built in. But for me, I'd almost have preferred to like stop the game before I finished it, played the DLC, and then like rolled my way back in and finished the game, because it takes place like right before you go to Nysa to like finish out the game, right? And even like I would have rather just like played the post game or had this been like a post game dungeon or something, but it's because it takes place before the end of the game kind of situation. I'm just like, eh. And the new systems were like, I don't really care. And then yeah, I think I just kind of burnt on it. Like I probably spent like 40 hours playing this game, which is good and it's worth your money and I liked it. But like the DLC for me is just like I have no interest in it whatsoever. Like I just don't. It didn't like float my fancy whatsoever. So that's that. That's my thoughts on that. I know it's not a lot, but I don't really think like that negative to say either. I just played it and I was just like, I'm totally uninterested in playing this. Like, but yeah. So there you go. That's Chain Echoes. Definitely an excellent game. If you made it this far, thanks. I would say if any of that's interesting, the game's fun to play. Like even if I spoiled everything for you, like it's just fun. The characters are decently written, but mostly like just playing through this game, the nostalgia stuff is excellent. It's quality. It never crashed or anything like a lot of these fucking Unreal Engine games. I think it's made in Unity. Unity is much better operating system or engine as far as I'm concerned, even if they have like some super shady practices. But yeah, there you go. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.